Good morning, everybody. I'd like to call to order the February MTA board meeting, which is being held jointly with the Metro North Railroad and Long Island Railroad Committee, New York City Transit Committee, Bridges and Tunnels Committee, Finance Committee, Diversity Committee, and Capital Program Oversight Committee. We are conducting this meeting remotely via Zoom and conference call. Governor Cuomo's Executive Order 202.1, which has subsequently been extended, suspends the open meetings law requirements, and accordingly, any provisions in the MTA bylaws regarding public attendance at meetings and board members participating and voting by phone are also suspended. Now I'd like to ask our General Counsel, Tom Quigley, to do the official roll call for the record. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, I'll now do the official roll call in alphabetical order. When I call your name, please verbally indicate your presence, and please make sure your microphone is not on mute. I see Chairman Foy is in attendance. Commissioner Albert.
Here.
Commissioner Barbas.
Present.
Commissioner Borelli.
Present.
Commissioner Brown.
Present.
Commissioner Calisi.
Present.
Commissioner Cortez Vasquez. Commissioner Fleischer.
Present.
Commissioner Glucksman.
Present.
Commissioner Herman.
Present.
Commissioner Jones. Commissioner Jones.
Present.
All right. Commissioner Lacewell.
Present.
Commissioner Law.
Here.
Commissioner Lynn.
Here.
Commissioner Mack.
Here.
Commissioner Mahaltis.
Here.
Commissioner Mojica. Commissioner Samuelson.
I'm here.
Commissioner Schwartz. Commissioner Tessitore.
Here.
Commissioner Zuckerman. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Tom. Later in the meeting, agency presidents and staff will submit procurements and actions for a vote. Your presence at this meeting and silence at the time of the vote will be considered an affirmative vote for the record. If you would like to vote no or abstain, please state your name and your vote at the relevant time. We will now move into our virtual comment period. As in prior months, speakers were able to register, this time on Tuesday, and send in their comments. We'll play public comments now for 30 minutes and make the full public comment video available online.
Good morning. We have 33 members of the public registered to speak today. The first 30 minutes of public comment will be delivered at the board meeting, and the remainder will be posted online for the public and board members on Thursday, February 18th, 2021. As a reminder, we ask that all public speakers adhere to the MTA rules of conduct and decorum. I would also like to remind our public speakers that in the interest of time and fairness to all speakers, we limit everyone to 2 minutes. Please be aware that there will be a warning beep to remind you that you have 30 seconds left to conclude your remarks. Thank you for your patience and understanding throughout the virtual public comment session. The next speaker is Tony Utano.
Good morning, I'm Tony Utano, President of the Transport Workers Union Local 100. Nobody feels safe in the subway, not the riders and certainly not the workers. Daily ridership was down 3.5 million last year, but more people were robbed, raped, and murdered in the system. Nearly 360 people were felony assault victims. That's just 20 fewer than the year before when the trains and stations were packed. Last weekend, as you know, 2 people were killed and 2 others were nearly killed during a senseless rampage on the A-line. So why is the MTA still pushing forward with a plan to temporarily shutter subway station booths, leaving them unstaffed for periods of time during the morning, evening, and overnight shifts? How can the possibility help the situation? Riders will be less safe and more fearful. It makes 0 sense. On one hand, you're demanding the NYPD put more uniformed police officers into the subway. We agree with that. But on the other hand, you're looking to take away uniformed station agents who provide extra sets of eyes and ears for law enforcement. Station agents call for for the police and medical assistance all the time. Here's a snapshot. On February 14th, station agents called for police and EMTs because of these situations. 2 riders were assaulted at different stations. 6 riders fell, including 3 who fell from a platform to the tracks. 2 subway cleaners were being harassed and menaced. A group of 8 riders, including 2 children, was stuck in an elevator. An unattended package was left near a station exit. There also were some reports of vandalism, someone breaking into a utility room, and people who were injured just outside the station on the street level. That's just in a 24-hour period, 1 day in the subway. We have joined with you in calling for more police officers. We have joined with you in calling on the state legislature to make spitting on transit workers a misdemeanor. Those are common sense measures to address real problems. This is opposite of common sense. Reducing station staffing would be a bad idea during the best of times. It's an absolutely horrendous idea today. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Alita Dupree.
Thank you, Board Chair Pat Foy and members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. It's good to be with you again. A lot going on today. I look forward to your conversations about tolling. Very important to fund our system. And we have a new administration. And I've always supported congestion pricing. So hopefully we can get that going. I submit to you that capital work is absolutely important, especially with ADA improvements, because I advocate for a full participation on the system. So we don't want to sacrifice ADA work for capital, for operating. And I do think the Second Avenue subway needs to be done because we've already done a lot of work on it. Those tunnels have been vacated for a long time. I still think also we should look at more efficient ways of managing our fare, because equity is not about hanging to the things and methods of the past, but ensuring inclusion in the improvements that the future has to offer. So I look forward to getting back to the system and using Omni and getting an Omni card and an Omni app, because I told you about my damaged Metro card story. And I didn't mention it last month, but I appreciate you setting up a direct link for email to the board, which brings me to a web form. So lastly, never have enough subway in one's life. It's legendary. I'm looking forward to being back on this system that is historic and legendary. And can't ever get enough of Grand Central Terminal. The past and the future are all relevant. Let's be mindful of history and tradition and never be a relic, but always be relevant. Thank you.
The next speaker is Kevin Zhang.
Hello, good afternoon to Pat Foy. My name is Kevin Zhang. So I want to mention about COVID started since I scared the subway during the pandemic, but on the D train and all lines and buses, I want to get rid of all the scary people instead, but we need to add the security cameras, and police will be on the train cars if it has the mask on it, but during the pandemic started. However, it was canceled because of the COVID situation of the broken bus redesign will be on hold, and adding trains of buses restored by the time during the pandemic. Once after ends, the all boroughs redesigned bus will resume after pandemic ends once they're vaccinated. For everybody, people, for that. So, and the final one is the ban travel. It needs to has the virus in the other country. If it has the virus, like for example, in New York, we should suspend all the commuter rails, as well as the LIRR. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you. The next speaker is Yuki Endo.
Thank you, MTA, for increasing the alternative police on the New York City subway station platform, but should also increase the standard on the daily platform, as well as along with the MTA police, also with other law enforcement agencies to increase patrol at the law of both law and radio networks, including law and radio mainland community. Not other essential business along mainland are not only hardened by pandemic, but the refusal of the law and radio to provide a shuttle bus during the weekend shutdown of no train service, especially near out of Cardi Place, West by Hicks. I am arguing all MTA law and radio association members to ride the night bus N22 and 24 bus between Hicks and Minnesota, along with the new store law and reporter to see how night bus does not yet have long and radio Canada. Also, the shuttle bus are badly needed for Hicks Photo Park, East Western Photo Park, because it is not fair at the other branches get shuttle buses. And mainline diesel shuttle buses in March 2021. Also, Eagle should be expand to Jonica and the Bronx to check on the MTA Nice and Bayline buses. Thank you.
The next speaker is Jason Anthony.
Greetings, MTA board from Bessemer, Alabama. Jason Anthony, the now former vice president of Passengers United and now social media member of the Congress of Essential Workers. This month, I want to address an incident that I witnessed on 14th Street on the 8th Avenue line this past week. I witnessed a woman being, let's say, in a robbery. Her phone was stolen by another individual at that point. This guy went away with no security cameras in the area, not even in the fare control area, and no police presence at the time. So it's very important. If there's no security cameras, transit police is unable to resolve crimes like this, like it happened to me back in last year. So it was very little until late, the announcement done yesterday by Governor Andrew Mark Cuomo and by Patrick Joseph Floyd of having train service suspended between 2 and 4 a.m. because they know that essential workers need to use the subway to get to and from their work place during those times, because bus service is so infrequent at those times. So we're going to continue this discussion next month, and that's all I have to say from Bessemer, Alabama for this month. Thank you.
The next speaker is Lucas Wolpick.
Good day once again, MTA board members. Today you'll be voting on toll increases. I believe that you should increase the tolls as much as possible because of the increased road traffic. I urge the MTA to implement a congestion charge for cars traveling on MTA bridges and tunnels during peak times, as well as implementing a gas tax. I also propose that once ridership returns, we implement a slightly higher fare for New York City Transit during peak times. For example, if you tap in between 6 a.m. and 10 a.m. on a weekday, you should pay a slightly higher fare, such as 25 cents more. If you transfer during peak times, you would be charged an extra 25 cents. Travels Far was a great way to commemorate the essential workers that we have lost due to the pandemic. Once again, the committee books were posted late. I understand that the board meeting is on Thursday instead of Wednesday, but I still think that the committee books should have been posted on Friday like they usually are. I am very happy with the switch to a 2 to 4 a.m. subway closure instead of the 1 to 5 a.m. subway closure. Also, I noticed that the fare evasion is much higher than it was in 2019. We need to come up with creative solutions to solve this problem. According to the committee books, the MTA lost $36 million because of subway fare evasion and $33 million because of bus fare evasion in the fourth quarter of 2020. Every dollar counts during this financial crisis. I would like to mention that the Long Island Railroad and Metro North train time apps have very different designs. I prefer the design of the Long Island Railroad app and think that the Metro North app should have the exact same design as the Long Island Railroad app.
The next speaker is Andy Quito.
Hey, good afternoon. It's me, Andy Quito, and I'm here to talk about the recent attacks that have been happening on the subways, the 2 murders that happened this past weekend, it's Valentine's weekend. This is more confirmed that we need more. We need at least 1,000 police, or not even more. We're gonna need at least 2,000 cops in the system, and also more, at least 1,000 social workers to get, for the mentally ill and to get the help they need. Because people like me, writers, don't feel safe anymore. And I'm glad that everybody's getting involved. The media is getting involved in demanding answers. And like police, they should not be like hiding in the back room or checking bags like I saw in Jamaica Center this morning. The police were just sitting there checking bags. Meanwhile, I saw people that were, opening the emergency exit and opening the door for a mentally ill person can go into the subway. And he was causing problems on my E-train that I was on this morning because he was riding between cars. So I had to report it. And they ended up searching the train at Roosevelt Avenue, but there was nobody there. So that's why we need cops on the stations, the mezzanine, in all the trains, walking back and forth during the entire route. Doesn't matter, because us riders don't feel safe, and we're requesting, us advocates are requesting for more cops, all right? More cops. They should not be sitting in their vans, checking bags. They need to be being proactive and keeping us safe whenever we have to go. That's all I gotta say. Hopefully you guys do the right thing and keep us safe. We need cops because it's getting really dangerous down there. Thank you so much for your time.
The next speaker is Charlton D'Souza.
Good morning. My name is Charlton D'Souza, and I'm the president of Passengers United. And I was outraged about the 2 victims who died on the subway. This did not need to happen. And as you guys know, at every MTA board meeting for the last 3 or 4 years, Passengers United has been saying we needed more police. Well, now there's 500 cops on the subway, but guess what the cops are doing? They're hiding in employee break rooms. They're hiding inside their police vans. They're drinking coffee, playing with their cell phones, and they're sitting at tables, 7 police officers at one table checking bags. This is not the way to do a police deployment. They need to be riding between the subway cars, eyeballing people, taking people off the subway cars who do not have masks. And, Passengers United is very proud because we supported the 500 police officers in the very beginning, unlike another organization, Riders Alliance. So they did not support that, but we did. And I feel that not only do we need to bring the police staffing level back at 3,000, but we also need 400 social workers in the subway system, because police officers are telling me it's taking 45 minutes just to take one homeless individual out of the subway system to convince them, to get into a shelter. So we need 400 social workers. We also need community volunteers in the subway overnight and throughout the day, checking on the homeless, taking their temperature. In fact, I think that there should be a program to give all the homeless vaccinations, the COVID-19 vaccinations. We need to be flooding the system, giving them masks, making sure they're safe. And also we need more drop-in facilities in New York City. We need places, for them to get that one-on-one intervention. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Iman Ramawi.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Iman Ramawi, and I'm the Access Ride coordinator and organizer in the Disability Justice Program at New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. As President Feinberg knows, the disability community is very upset that the MTA has again started charging fares on Access-a-Ride. We are very grateful that at the beginning of the pandemic, you immediately recognized the enormous safety concerns that fare collection presented for both the customers and the drivers. Those safety concerns are just as critical now as they were a year ago, given that New York's high COVID numbers, and the MTA must protect the only group of riders who are forced to have direct contact with their drivers to pay their fare. We also oppose a fare hike since it will have a horrible effect on people with disabilities. I remember what it was like living on a fixed income with the measly Social Security income and how I had to budget myself with emergencies often popping up. Oftentimes, I couldn't even afford to take Access-a-Ride because I ran out of money. Adding even 25 cents to the fare will make it extremely difficult for people, and you may even see a drop in ridership, especially during COVID. Finally, as you know, ARG has been attending MTA board meetings since we started in 2016. While we appreciate that meetings are still being held during COVID and that public comments are still being received, we notice that elected officials are frequently pushed to the front of the line while the community members are pushed to the back. This means the public comments only commence after the 30-minute mark, and then they have no part in the live feed that appears to the MTA. We ask that you put the community of riders first and then move on to elected officials. Alternatively, we ask you to extend the 30-minute period for the public comments to allow those who registered the opportunity to air their questions during the live feed. Thank you.
The next speaker is Lisa Daglian.
Greetings, I'm Lisa Daglian, Executive Director of the Permanent Citizens Advisory Committee to the MTA, PCAC. Crime underground is first and foremost on riders' minds. The horrific stabbings over the weekend were the culmination of months of attacks that are putting us all on edge. We support the call for more police, for people to be able to call 311 from the system, more cameras underground, harsher penalties for crimes against transit workers, and the concurrent need for more mental health services and housing. For riders to come back to transit, they must feel and be safe. We need to hear from the transit police on a regular basis about crime and their tactics. Police should be deployed based on data and need. That's just one critical thing that's been lost in the year without committee meetings. It's time to bring them back, along with same-day testimony. It's also time for the governor to stop raiding MTA funds. We'll continue to be by your side as you advocate for much-needed federal aid. But it's hard to make the case when so-called dedicated funds are being picked from the lockbox, as in the exec budget. It's hard to beseech the feds to move quickly on congestion pricing when its component parts, i.e. internet sales tax, are being redirected to the state's general fund. The state's raid on MTA funds will deprive riders of services and improvements and may hasten fare hikes. MTA does not stand for ATM. Riders deserve better. There was some good news. We're 2 giant steps closer to overnight subway service with restoration of service between 1 and 2 and 4 and 5. We've been calling for this for months to allow travel during the most heavily used overnight hours. The closures have been a real burden on essential workers and more recently, people going to overnight vaccine appointments. The partial reopening will certainly help, though not solve the problem that full reopening ultimately will. We'd still like to see the metrics and milestones be used to determine if cleaning is required to the same extent. 24/7 subway service is an integral part of restarting the economy and getting on with life. But this is a sign of hope and a great start. Thank you.
The next speaker is Rachel Foss.
Good morning. I'm Rachel Foss, the Senior Research Analyst for reInvent Albany. We advocate for more transparent and accountable New York government, including for authorities like the MTA. Since the April 2020 state budget gave the governor the ability to withhold money from crucial state service providers like the MTA, we and other advocates have been concerned about possible raids on MTA funds. As of February 2021, we now know, as covered by the New York Daily News, that the governor plans to raid $145 million in dedicated taxes, including about $100 million from Metro Mass Transportation Operating Assistance Fund and $6.5 million from the Central Business District Trust Fund. These raids are unacceptable. The MTA faces the largest financial crisis in its history and has been repeatedly downgraded by bond raiders. Raids of transit dedicated funds are a backdoor tax on MTA riders, paid in the form of fare hikes and service cuts. Raiding dedicated taxes breaks trust with the public who pay these taxes with the understanding that they will fund transit service, not prop up the state's general fund. Raids also undermine the MTA's credit rating by creating uncertainty about whether dedicated funds are truly dedicated and reliable. Notably, the proposed fare and toll increases were projected to bring in about $148 million for the MTA, nearly the same as the state raid. The legislature must reject this $145 million raid on MTA dedicated funds. While we now know how much the governor plans to raise for next year's budget, the MTA and the state division of the budget have still not answered exactly how much money New York State has taken from the MTA in the current year's budget. Is it 261 million or is it more now? And how much will be paid back to the MTA? This is because the MTA rebaselined its budget in 2020 and is with McKinsey's information, moving the goalposts on how much state money it says it will receive. This has obfuscated the amount of money taken by the state from the MTA. In response to questioning on this issue, CFO Bob Ferran said to the legislature that the MTA would be receiving more money than we had in our budget. This is basically like an employer taking money from your paycheck and then at the end of the year paying some of it back and calling it a bonus. The net effect is less money for MTA riders, with the state rating the MTA's dedicated funds for its general operating expenses. We therefore ask the MTA to show riders exactly how much money New York State owes from the MTA from the money taken in 2020, and again ask for the rates to be rejected by the state legislature. Thank you for your consideration.
The next speaker is Marie Bowden.
I'm interested in safety, both safety for the driver and the pedestrian. I've been interested in the bridges and tunnels for a while, and I subscribe to the notification system where I get a notification from the bridges and tunnel, first with the facility and then with a short piece of information about what's going on. It's practically in real time. Very helpful. I've been doing all of the facilities to see just what kind of information they provide, and it's been excellent. And so I went to the section and I signed up for the elevator announcements, and it tells me which elevator is down for service, when it's expected to be back, and when it is back. Now, that notification system is excellent, and I compliment the MTA. Beyond that, I didn't expect to be here. I'm getting a little old at this, but I encouraged by I'm looking forward to coming back to the meetings and standing at that podium and greeting you personally. There's a value in personal contact, and I look forward to it. And I again thank all of the people at the MTA and others who have taught me, one, how to behave, and two, what else is going on. I get confused. I'm 87. I get confused by this on and off beeping stuff, but I'm looking forward to seeing you all again. And I think you all are doing an excellent job. It's a difficult time. Thank you. I'm done. Bye.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mary Parson Lavelle.
Good morning. My name is Mary Parson Lavelle, Chair of Civics United for Railroad Environmental Solutions. I'm speaking today on behalf of more than 1 million people in Queens, Nassau, and Suffolk counties whose health is being needlessly harmed by toxic emissions of these diesel emissions from the Long Island Railroad's 1970 locomotives. You unconscionably sold and continue to lease these unregulated, high-polluting locomotives to your freight rail concessionaire, New York and Atlantic Railway. Since 2013, the New York State Legislature has given the MTA LIRR $3 million a year to clean our community air by repowering these locomotives. However, the MTA recognized that the Long Island Railroad did not conduct a real and fair competition after procurement irregularities for prototypes came to light. This is why the MTA stopped 2 procurements for this locomotive power. And recently, MTA was reported to have taken away Long Island Railroad's control over capital projects. You should have almost $20 million in hand in the controller's contract number DR 36644 to complete this project and take away 95% of this pollution from the air our families are breathing. The New York and Atlantic Railway doesn't need brand new locomotives. You can complete this project by repowering the MP15s for about $1.9 million each. New York, New Jersey Rail already did this type of cost-efficient Tier 4 switcher repower project in 2015, as have other railroads. Now that the MTA construction and development procurement is in the driver's seat, please complete this project by releasing an RFP for a Tier 4 switcher repower of MP15s. Thank you and have a great day.
The next speaker is Andy Pollock.
Good morning, Chairman Foy and members of the board. I'm Andy Pollock. I'm a member of Passengers United. First of all, I am pleased to hear the announcement that starting this upcoming Monday on the 22nd, if I am correct, just double checking. Yep. Overnight subway service is going to be only from, the suspension will be from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., which is good because we have historical numbers to prove that 4 a.m. has the highest amount of overnight riders in the entire system. Second, today is the most anticipated toll hike vote. So I'm looking forward to hearing the debate from the board members this morning and going into the afternoon. Thirdly, I'm very disturbed to hear about the incidents that happened on the A line over President's Day weekend. Very heartbreaking incidents. 2 of the victims were homeless people. Thoughts and prayers for everyone involved, but safety has got to improve. I'm in complete agreement on that. We're facing a very rough time in our city's history, of course, with this crime wave. So let's see what happens with the 500 additional officers that were first proposed back in 2019. It's been a 2-year battle, but it seems they have finally have come. So let's see how it happens on that end. And lastly, last month I noticed there were two other public speakers who didn't get a chance to speak. I will mention that New Jersey Transit had 75 members of the public who all got to speak to Kevin Corbett. So the rules have got to start changing, maybe even increase the time limit to 3 minutes. So one more point, please release the board materials on Fridays. It should be a standard because it's ridiculous. We should have been able to get the materials way before. Excuse me for a second. My time is up. Point is, please release the board materials when it's not a holiday weekend. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Gerard Bringman.
Good day. I'm Gerard Bringman, Chair of the Long Island Railroad Commuter Council. Even before the horrible events over the past weekend, I had planned to speak about the MTA's homeless problem. Today, my call for action is even more urgent. Managing the homeless population shouldn't be the MTA's problem, but it is de facto. For months, I've been hearing from my fellow commuters that they're seeing a growing number of homeless individuals in Penn Station and on stations out on Long Island, with an increase in aggressive panhandling. They don't feel safe. That feeling extends when they get into the subways, and I see the same on my daily commute. At our council meeting last week, we heard from the director of the MTA's homeless program office. She explained how she and her staff person collaborate with the various police and the BRC and SUS, the 2 contractors who provide services to homeless in New York City and on Long Island. While we appreciate these efforts, the problem remains. Last June, an IG audit found deficiencies in the MTA's homeless outreach activities. So we have questions. What is the MTA doing to correct them? What kind of resources is the MTA dedicating? And most importantly, what are the city and state doing to support these efforts? It's time for a full court press on an ongoing basis to get these unfortunate people the help they need and a safe place to stay. The status quo is not okay. Penn Station and our stations on Long Island are not, nor they should be, homeless shelters. Thank you.
The next speaker will be Isabella Reichenbach.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, you can begin when you're ready.
My name is Isabella Reichenbach, and I'm a high school student in Manhattan, New York. I'm calling because I'm concerned about the safety in the New York City subway platforms. According to the MTA, in 2020, 158 people fell on the train tracks and 58 of them died. Although there are no statistics for 2021 yet, there seems to be a rise in the number of people being pushed from the subway platform. I have read that the MTA has contemplated the installation of sliding glass doors on New York City platforms in the past, but has chosen not to move forward because of the project's high cost. In São Paulo, Brazil, The city overcame this challenge by installing guardrails on the older train platforms, which are less costly and still efficient in accident and homicide prevention. That same guardrail system used in Brazil is used in New York City today to prevent people from falling off of subway staircases. If we're able to protect people when going down the stairs, why can't we protect them from a more lethal fall into the tracks? New York City has one of the best subway systems in the world, but we need change. I'm asking you to please consider adding protection to the subway platform. Nobody should be afraid of riding our train. Thank you.
The next speaker is CN.
Locking up mentally ill people for longer amounts of time will not stop attacks on transit workers. In New York City, most of the psychiatrists, therapists, and counselors will not take patients with Medicaid, other health plans, or who are uninsured. That needs to stop. It should be a requirement that if a psychiatrist is going to be certified in New York State, they cannot turn away a mentally ill person on the fact that they are unable to pay or that they are uninsured. I also think there should be a financial stipend to help encourage homeless people and the uninsured to seek mental health treatment if they need to. And a lot of these people live on the streets not because they want to, but because they feel that it's safer than being in the shelter system. So there should be improvements to the shelter system and the mental health services, if there are any, in the homeless shelter system. We should have a public think tank to really address this issue of how do homeless people who are uninsured most of the time are able to stay on their medication, receive their medication, or even refill their medication. There needs to be a stop to psychiatrists only accepting people who are self-payers. After all, they should be helping people, not benefiting and profiting off of people with mental health issues. We need to prevent and not focus so much on punishment. These are our fellow New Yorkers, and we shouldn't think of them as anything less. We should really try to solve the issue. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes the public comment period.
Thank you. Tom.
Thank you. I'd like to call the names of several board members who did not respond at the initial roll call. Please indicate verbally if you are present. Commissioner Cortez Vasquez.
Present.
Commissioner Mojica.
Present.
Commissioner Schwartz.
Present.
Commissioner Zuckerman.
Here.
Thank you. We have a full board, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you all for joining this month's virtual meeting of the MTA Board. It is with a heavy heart that we will begin today with another moment of silence to acknowledge members of the MTA family who have passed since our last meeting. We recognize and honor their service and their memory. Sarah.
Thank you, Pat. Unfortunately, I have 5 members of the transit family to read today. Peter Starachi, Efran Martinez, Eric Peterson, Wilfredo Ferran, Raymond Malapo.
Thank you. Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is with great sorrow that we honor our colleagues who have passed. Our thoughts and prayers are with their families and their loved ones. This morning, I would like to recognize the passing of 4 of our heroes who will always be in our hearts of the Buses family. Dennis Fagan, Errol Lazama, Herbert Miller, Joseph Williams. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And Phil.
Thank you, Pat. It is with deep sadness that we lost another member of the Long Island Railroad family to COVID-19. Anthony Ocolo, a stockman in our stores department, died on February 5th. Anthony joined the Long Island Railroad family in 1997 and dedicated 24 years of service at the railroad. He was a proud member of Transportation Communications Union. And he took pride in everything he did behind the scenes, ensuring that we had supplies for service, materials for capital projects, and appropriate safety gear when we needed them, including all the vital PPE, helping to keep colleagues and public safer during this pandemic. Publicly, he's an unsung hero. To us, he's a man of faith who every action demonstrated his love of his family, his colleagues, and his job. Our heartfelt condolences to all of Anthony's colleagues, his friends and families, his wife, Olusha, and his 3 children, and heartfelt condolences to our colleagues at buses and transit.
I now ask all of you to join us, please, in a moment of silence for our fallen colleagues. Thank you. I want to begin today with a few words on safety and security, which is always our top priority. After the shocking and tragic events of last weekend, where 4 customers were brutally attacked and 2 of the victims lost their lives. This was a devastating and horrific crime, and we are taking it seriously. We're grateful to the NYPD for their aggressive and rapid response in apprehending the perpetrator responsible for these incidents and obtaining a confession. But we also need to do everything we can to ensure we have a safe and secure system for our customers and our employees. Sarah Feinberg and I have called on Mayor de Blasio and Commissioner Shea to assign an additional 1,000 NYPD officers to the Transit Bureau to patrol subways and buses, above the 500 officers they committed to deploying. Sarah has been consistently advocating for an enhanced security presence in the system since her time on the MTA board and throughout her service as interim president of New York City Transit. And it's clearer than ever before that this is the right call. We thank the Mayor and Commissioner Shea for acting quickly to deploy an additional 644 officers to the system, and Transit Chief Kathleen O'Reilly for her hard work and partnership. This is a good first step, but we're going to need roughly 900 more police officers to provide the kind of coverage and security that our customers and dedicated employees deserve. I'll note that our request would bring us back to the level of NYPD staffing in the subways that existed in 1995, when the New York City Transit Police merged with the NYPD to form today's NYPD Transit Bureau. We also need the City of New York to commit more mental health resources to address the growing crisis facing our city, and for which the subway has been ground zero. Our heroic frontline employees are transit workers, not social workers. We must ensure services and resources are available to the people in our city who need them. As a start, we have asked the city to include the subway system in its 311 system, so customers can alert and employees can alert the proper authorities about New Yorkers in need, rather than having to go through the NYPD as is now required. Police need only get involved in cases where a person poses a threat to themselves or others. We must and will continue to do everything we can so that our customers and employees feel safe in our system. This is more important than ever as we begin our phased reopening of the subways. As you all know, the subways have been closed overnight from 1 a.m. to 5 a.m. since May 6th of last year. But under a change we announced with Governor Cuomo earlier this week, the subway will stay open until 2 a.m. and reopen at 4 a.m. starting the early morning hours of this coming Monday, February 22nd. This development reflects the city's ongoing reopening, the positive trends we're seeing with increasing vaccinations, a drop in the COVID infection and hospitalization rates, resumption of indoor dining, extended hours for bars and restaurants, and the reopening of arenas and stadia. But by maintaining a 2-hour service suspension, we can continue our enhanced disinfecting regime, which has led the subway to be the cleanest it's ever been. Our customer surveys show that the cleaning and disinfecting effort is an important factor to 76% of our customers in returning to the system. We continue to focus on vaccinating our own employees who are eligible as public transit workers to receive the vaccine under the state's plan, under the state's distribution plan. So far, approximately 7,000 MTA employees have been vaccinated, and we plan to vaccinate another 2,000 by the end of the month, bringing us to a little over 10% of our workforce having been vaccinated. We're working tirelessly to expand vaccine access to every single employee who wants one, so they can keep doing the great job that they've all been doing during the pandemic. But even as this rollout moves full speed ahead, we must stay vigilant. We urge everyone to continue to wearing a mask at all times while in the transit system. I'm proud to say that mask usage is at approximately 97%, and we need to keep it up to continue to beat the pandemic. To date, the MTA has distributed 7.2 million masks to customers and stations, and through our volunteer mask force, which will be out again in the subways and buses on February 25th. And we've distributed to our employees 6.6 million N95 and KN95 masks, along with 8 million surgical masks. A word about the budget in Washington. Today, our CFO, Bob Foran, will present the February update to our proposed financial plan. Despite already receiving extraordinary sums of federal aid last year, $4 billion in the CARES Act, and another $4 billion in CARISA in December, and borrowing a total of $3.4 billion through the municipal lending facility, we are still in desperate need of substantially more funds over the financial plan period. However, thanks to the federal aid received in December of last year, we do have some good news. With the additional $4 billion in CARISA, we have been able to eliminate the worst-case service reductions that had been previously on the table for 2021. With improved financial results from last year, we are now able to take these worst-case reductions off the table in 2022 as well. However, drastic service reductions must remain on the table for 2023 and 2024, without future federal aid to offset the remaining $8 billion projected deficit over the financial plan period. Fortunately, there is reason for optimism on this front. A letter from Speaker Pelosi to the New York congressional delegation was recently made public, outlining the specifics of relief coming to the state. It includes $8.8 billion for New York area transit. This news, together with reports that the $1 billion, President Biden's $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, will include at least $30 billion for mass transit nationally, helps us to breathe a little easier. We're grateful to Speaker Pelosi, Majority Leader Schumer, and the entire New York delegation for their perseverance on behalf of our agency. A word about tolls. The fact, however, remains that even with additional federal aid in the pipeline, we must continue to take action to protect our extremely fragile budget. Which brings me to today's review of toll proposals. Last month, we postponed fare adjustments. We don't take the thought of raising tolls lightly either, but the planned increase will help us maintain essential services throughout the MTA system. It's also important to recognize that vehicle traffic has rebounded strongly since the height of the pandemic. While ridership remains down by more than 70% on average across subways and commuter rails and buses, crossings on MTA bridges and tunnels have come back more quickly. Since January 1st, traffic is down between 10 and 20% on our bridges and tunnels on any given day compared to pre-pandemic levels. Biennial toll increases are assumed in MTA financial plans, including the most recent budget, which we are only able to balance as a result of significant federal emergency aid and borrowing the maximum allowable amount through the Federal Reserve's municipal liquidity facility. Since 2010, the MTA has relied on biennial toll increases to provide predictable increases for our budget. Increases that typically do not even keep pace with inflation growth. Given the pandemic's devastating impact on our finances, it's all the more important that we move forward with consideration of toll increases this year. Before we discuss and vote on the 2021 toll increases later in this meeting, I want to reassure Staten Island commuters, as I did last month, that we will continue their resident discount. The importance of maintaining that discount was clearly conveyed to us during the public hearing process by elected officials from Staten Island and our customers. If the board moves forward with this recommended toll increase, it will be evenly applied to all current rates, including those with resident discounts. That means the actual toll paid by Staten Island residents crossing the Verrazano would rise 20 cents from $2.75 to $2.95. This would mark the first increase for Staten Island residents since 2013, even as the MTA raised tolls on the rest of our crossings in 2015, 2017, and 2019. I'll also note that this increase is still less than the 11.3% increase in inflation since 2013. In conclusion, I'd also like to recognize Mario Peliquin for his service as MTA Chief Operating Officer. Mario's been at the center of our pandemic response, putting the agency and its needs ahead of his own family during this unprecedented public health crisis. Mario will be moving on from the MTA at the end of this month, and will be coming back to you with a plan for an acting COO. I want to thank Mario for his service, and we wish him all the best in his next chapter. Meanwhile, today we're also welcoming a new member of the senior leadership team who started earlier this month, Quimel Arroyo, our new MTA Chief Accessibility Officer. It's the first time we've had such a position system-wide, and Q's hiring reflects our commitment to accessibility issues. Q is a seasoned leader and accessibility expert who spent 5 years at the New York City Department of Transportation as Chief Accessibility Specialist and ADA Coordinator and Disability Service Facilitator. His strategic guidance and leadership will be invaluable to us as we continue to advance accessibility across the system, and we're delighted to have him on board. Q, would you like to say a few words?
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Pat. And thank you all for the amazing work that's been going on at the MTA. As Pat said, I come from New York City DOT, where I led accessibility efforts for just shy of 6 years. And I have to say, I am new to the table at the MTA, but I am not new to a lot of these conversations, having represented the city on a lot of these issues and worked with the MTA on elevators and other accessibility initiatives. I have to say that I've been floored by what I've seen at the MTA, the colleagues, and all the work that has already started and been done for accessibility. I look forward to enhancing those projects, moving the dial forward and increasing the speed at which we move on accessibility. I think the message that we're sending is very loud and clear. Despite the pandemic, despite the financial situation we're facing, accessibility matters at the MTA. I look forward to working with my colleagues within the disability community and broadening the access for the stakeholders at the table on accessibility. I am a New Yorker with a disability myself, but I do not believe that accessibilities are synonymous or analogous with disabilities. I will be working forward to increasing access and enhancing the systems for aging New Yorkers, parents with strollers, and the community at large, many of whom have invisible disabilities, and welcoming them to the conversation on increasing accessibility throughout the network, New York City Transit and the railroads, Metro North, Long Island Railroad, and of course, bridges and tunnels. Thank you again, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Q. I want to end today with another bright spot of the month for us at the MTA. To bring some joy back to the system during this difficult time, Sarah and her team at New York City Transit have been working hard to coordinate new announcements with some iconic New York voices who have recorded a special message for our incredible workforce this morning. Sarah.
Thanks, Pat. It feels strange to talk about a moment of joy right now, given the week that we've had. But this is something we've been working on at Transit for months now, and it's part of an acknowledgement that it's been a tough year at Transit and a tough year for the MTA. But also, in order for the city to come back and for the New York economy to come back, the subway has to come back and our riders have to come back. And so this was something we started working on a couple of months ago, and we reached out to New York Nico, who's known as the sort of unofficial talent scout of New York, asked him if he'd like to work with us on bringing some new voices into the subway system, and he generously agreed and has been working very hard on this for the last couple of months, along with our team, led in my office by Andrew Wilcox. And ultimately, they brought more than 25. These are true New York, authentic, iconic voices into the subway system, and bus system. And we didn't just ask them to sort of stuff themselves into the old announcements we've been using for a long time. We asked them to bring their personality to this exercise. And so, if you're in our system, anytime in the next month or so, you're going to hear, Jerry Seinfeld and Whoopi Goldberg and Cameron and Pat Kiernan and Edie Falco and a bunch of other folks who you'll instantly recognize. And I'm grateful to them and to Andrew and to others for all the work, and Sarah Meyer's team and others for all the work they've done on this. And then as part of this, they've also were generous with their time and were compiled a video thanking MTA workers for all of their work. So I think we've got either part of the thank you video or part of the compilation of announcements, and we can go to that. Thank you very much.
Just want to say thanks to all the great MTA employees for keeping the city going.
Definitely shout out to all the MTA workers.
I want to send a super shout out to all of the MTA workers.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, the employees that work at the MTA.
To the entire MTA crew, community, and all you employees, thank you.
Big shout out to the MTA employees because you guys have been working all throughout this pandemic.
Thank you so much for literally sticking your heads out of a moving vehicle.
I want you to know that you're appreciated.
You know what I mean? A lot of people wouldn't been able to make it to work, make it to important places they needed to be without you guys.
I appreciate you.
Big thanks from me to you. You are truly the veins of New York City.
I just want to say thank you and I hope that you guys are having a happy holiday season. Thank you, thank you, thank you, MTA. You are New York stars.
Thank you, MTA employees. You guys are doing God's work, so I appreciate you.
On behalf of every New Yorker, thank you for keeping us going at a really tough time.
I want to give this time to shout out my mother because my mom works for MTA. Hey, Mom.
I've ridden many of your trains. I want to wish you a very happy Valentine's Day.
If it wasn't for y'all, the whole city would be stopped, shut down.
Big shout out to the MTA employees, man. I appreciate y'all so much.
Their valor and their bravery is amazing to me.
You know, not enough people say thank you, but take our thanks and take it from all of New York.
You know what I'm saying? For everybody that ever cussed you out at the booth, you know what I'm saying? We take it all back. You know what I'm saying? We love you. You're the essentialist of the essential. Peace and love, yo. Bodega
Right.
Boys.
So that was 1 or 2 minutes, but to give you an idea of it, I think that video, actually the one that we've shared with our employees, goes on for more than 7 minutes because it was people talking about their stories of growing up on the MTA and how much it impacted their lives and how much it means to them to be able to have their voice in our system. So that's just an idea of this project. And obviously I know all of you have been in the system in our on subways and buses, and so you've probably heard it yourselves. So happy to take any questions, but it's been a great thing that we've done this month. Thanks, Pat.
Sarah, thanks a lot. It's important to note that Jerry Seinfeld's message was not about nothing. It was about thanking the MTA workers. I want to thank all of the celebrities and performers who participated in this special video message. And with that, I'll turn it to Pat Warren for an update on COVID-19. Pat.
Thank you, Chairman. The MTA continues to lead the nation's passenger transportation sector in the implementation of safety measures to reduce risks to our employees and customers involving COVID. The number of COVID-19 cases in New York City remains a great concern to us, although we are gratified to see a recent decrease in new cases. Currently, the city's positivity rate for infections hovers near 5%. MTA's rate is half of that at about 2.5%. Due to the voluntary diagnostic testing program that we put in place in the fall, we've been able to quickly identify and return our employees to work that have been in close contact but are not ill or infected. To date, we have conducted over 32,000 tests for our employees and continue to average over 2,000 per week. Of significance since we met last is that the MTA has been able to take advantage of recent state, city, and local vaccination programs by getting nearly 7,000 of our employees, about 10% vaccinated. This is a good start, but we have a significant way to go. To this end, the To this end, the quantity of vaccines available to New York is increasing, and we expect to increase the rate of vaccinations for our workforce to include opening vaccination hubs inside the MTA to support this effort. As is our standard, we continue the many protocols previously established to protect our employees and customers, to include the distribution of millions and millions of masks, as well as other PPE for employees and customers. Further, we will continue our daily cleaning and disinfecting of stations, trains, buses, paratransit vehicles, and employee workspaces. Likewise, our air filtration enhancements implemented in facilities, trains, and buses, together with the pilot projects we are undertaking using cutting-edge air filtration products, remains the centerpiece of our efforts to protect our employees and customers. Together with social distancing, mask usage remains a critical defense against contracting and spreading the virus, according to the CDC. Mask usage is mask usage among our riders remains very high, as was just noticed. It's about 99% on buses, 97% in the subway, and an average over 97% overall. And we thank our ridership for their support and respect that they show one another. In closing, we are grateful for the patronage of our customers and are committed to continuing to bring the safest ground transportation to New York. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Pat. I know Commissioner Tessitore has a question or a comment.
Actually, more of a comment, if I could. I just want to take a minute and recognize Smart General Chairman Anthony Simon for working closely with Nassau County Executive Laura Curran and Suffolk County Executive Steve Ballone and their staffs in prioritizing transportation workers on Long Island and getting vaccines. Anthony, with a small group of union officials, was able to deliver vaccines for close to 600 Long Island Railroad workers over the last month or so by reaching out to varying essential crafts to make appointments. The Nassau and Suffolk locations have been a great help, allowing our workforce to receive vaccines around their work schedules, as most of them do live on Long Island. So while we have more to go, thank you to Anthony and to both counties' leadership teams and the MTA management support in making this happen as we continue to battle this pandemic. And we look forward to bringing back riders to a safe system.
Vinny, thank you for that comment. Any other questions or comments for Pat Warren? All right, thanks. Today we're joined by Transit Bureau Chief Kathleen O'Reilly for an update on subway safety and security. I want to thank Chief O'Reilly for the Transit Bureau's ongoing efforts in keeping the system safe. Applaud the NYPD's rapid and effective work in arresting the perpetrator in the horrific crimes on Saturday on the A-line. Chief.
Good morning, everyone. This past weekend, a troubled individual took the lives of 2 innocent victims and seriously injured another 2 inside our subway system. My thoughts and prayers go out to the victims and to the families of those affected by these senseless acts of violence. Our understanding of the series of events unfolded very quickly. We learned of the first incident shortly after 10 p.m. Friday evening. Approximately 3 hours later, on Saturday morning, we had our 4th stabbing and our 2nd homicide. We were confronted with the crime scenes that encompassed 2 separate boroughs and spanned opposite ends of the A-line. We immediately mobilized transit, patrol, and investigative resources as my detective bureau counterparts and I responded from home to spearhead the investigation. This culminated in the apprehension of the perpetrator 14 hours after the investigation began. I commend the many members of the NYPD who played a part in seeing this investigation through to a swift arrest. On to the month of January, where total major felonies in the transit system were down 56%, with 148 fewer incidents than January of last year. January saw declines in robberies, grand larcenies. The only increase we saw was in felony assaults, with 9 additional incidents during this month. Of the 43 felony assaults that occurred during January, 15 were assaults on officers as they were taking police action. In fact, assaults on police officers are up 200% for the month when compared with the 5 incidents that were committed last year. Case in point, on Tuesday, 2 of my officers were spat on, punched, and kicked when they confronted a man who was smoking inside the South Ferry subway station. The individual, a state parolee, now faces multiple counts of assault. In keeping with the police commissioner's direction, we have surged 500 plus uniform members into the subway system. This involves a combination of redeployment, overtime, as well as patrol and counterterrorism officers assigned to the subway system. This is not a transit bureau plan. This is an NYPD plan, and it remains a fluid plan subject to emerging needs and trends. The ridership should feel secure by the increased uniform presence. A common sight will be officers on board trains, securing the entryways and patrolling the platforms, as was the case the other night when officers were inspecting a number 6 train at Grand Central, only to see a disruptive and unmasked individual playing music on a large portable speaker. Conferral with the train conductor indicated the man was a public nuisance for several stops, and officers soon moved in and took the person into custody. The 23-year-old man was ultimately tied to an incident of an attempted murder from January. The investigation continues and charges are pending in that particular case. Lastly, I want to note that we are committed to supporting the Department of Homeless Services and other stakeholders in addressing the issue of homelessness and its impact on our subways. We stand ready alongside our partners to leverage the tools at our disposal to meet this challenging issue. That concludes my update, and I thank you for your time this morning.
Chief, I just want to join in condemning the increase in attacks on police anywhere, but especially in the transit system. The numbers that you reported are alarming and horrific, and I think give some sense of the challenges that your officers and our customers and employees face. And I do want to thank the police commissioner and the mayor for the increase in 644 officers that are assigned to the work that you and your colleagues are doing.
I concur with that.
Randy?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your report there, Chief. Back in 73, 74, 75, I was a conductor and motorman on the train, the Transit Authority, and we had these 8Ps, they call them. They used to work the trains 8P to 4A, walking back and forth along the train. Is this something, an initiative that you're thinking about doing here? Because I remember it being very, very successful.
We have train patrols already, and our officers do walk throughout the train.
Okay, thank you.
Chief, thank you for reporting and for your work. With that, I'm going to turn to Bob for the February financial plan.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you recall, 2020, we anticipated that we would balance the budget with the $4.1 billion CARE funding, which we received in the springtime, and also with deficit borrowing. We borrowed $2.9 billion from the MLF, the Federal Reserve's liquidity facility, for deficit borrowing, and we had anticipated that we would spend about $1.1 billion of that to balance 2020. Well, let's see what's changed. So on the first slide, the $2.9 billion that was borrowed, the $1.1 again was anticipated to be used. A $1.8 billion was going to roll over and help us balance this year, 2021. But things did change. We had some positive budget variances versus what we had estimated. On the revenue side, fare box revenues were $184 million higher than we expected, split roughly 50-50 between buses and the subways. Toll revenues were higher. We saw that trend coming. Crossings increased more than we had thought, but 248. We did have lower revenues, both on advertising and others, and the capital reimbursement. That's money that we received from the capital program for our labor that's working in the system, force account work. Since the capital program was on pause, at least the 20 to 24 capital program was on pause for the year, there was less capital work done, so the reimbursements were significantly lower. On the expense side, labor expenses, $732 million down. Now about $522 million of that is just timing. The biggest item is the payroll tax deferrals. Under the CARES Act, we were allowed to defer payroll taxes. We didn't have to send them into the federal government, and we'll pay half of it back at the end of this year and the other half at the end of 2022, and that was $380 million. We did have vacancy savings We took about 210, so that was the hiring freeze that continued, $1 million. Non-labor expenses, 336. About 247 of that was just timing expenses that we accrued in 2020 but aren't going to be paid until 2021 this year. So in total, the timing was about $769 million, or about 81%. State subsidies did come in higher than we had estimated, $447 million, and other taxes such as MRT and urban tax were higher. So in total, we had significantly more cash coming in 2020 than we had anticipated. So if that enabled us not to have to use the proceeds of the MLF borrowing. So as you can see, total resources then were $3.4 billion. If you take out the $2.9 billion of deficit financing, which we will need to use this year, and we expect that we will need to use in 2022, the year-end balance was $514 million. Now, as you know, that rolls over to address deficits in the next year. So on the next slide, let's look to see what has changed since the adopted 2021 budget. And these are cumulative over the plan period. First, there's changes in reestimates that improve the financial results. First, you have the $514 million that we talked about earlier. Then you have the unused general reserve. We had anticipated that we would have to use the 2020 reserve, about $170 million to balance the budget last year. We didn't have to, and we were rolling it forward to balance the budget this year. We had state subsidy reestimates of about $550 million, other subsidy reestimates $268, and lower projected debt service of $66 million during the plan period. There's changes in reestimates that worsen financial results. CRISA aid, that is the package that was passed at the end of December, we had estimated that we would receive $4.5 billion from that this year. It looks like now it's going to be $4 billion, so $500 million less than estimated. Additional savings, we've identified targets. We're seeing some slippage over the 4-year period of 92. We're going to work to recover those, but that was worsening financial results. And then, as you all know, the delay in fare and toll increases. We're estimating if we do that mid-year, it'd be about $32 million reduction. So these reestimates, as well as other changes not listed here, are favorable during the plan period, 21 to 24, by $1.15 billion. Now, it's the improvement that we're seeing here and the anticipated receipt of additional federal aid that the chairman mentioned allows us to avoid the service reductions in 2022. As a reminder, that was going to be the 40% and 50% reductions. We didn't have to start it this year, and it looks like we won't have to do it next year. And that was $1.274 billion as a deficit reduction. So it'll enable us to maintain higher levels of service for our customers and avoid imminent layoffs. Let's go to the next slide. So this looks at what the preliminary February plan would be and where we're going to end up. Now, again, I want to remind everyone that we have $2.9 billion of MLF deficit financing that's in this plan, $4 billion of CRISA federal aid coming in this year. We do still have service reductions in 23 and 24, and we have a permanent wage freeze for 22 to 24. And that'll still leave a cumulative deficit of about $8 billion through this period. Now, that's pretty much where we were. So the cash favorable results allowing us to reduce the service reductions, but those offset. So now you can see in 2021, with the rollover of the $514 million from 2020 and $1.65 billion from deficit financing MLF, $4 billion of CRISA, we're going to break even in 2021. As you look forward to 2022 and 3 and 4, significant deficits remain. We'll take the balance of the MLF financing in 2022. We still have the wage freeze in there, and it leaves us with a projected deficit of 3.129, 2.4 in 23 and 2.4 in 24. As I said again, in total, almost $8 billion of deficits, and that is the ask that we have before the federal government through the American Rescue Plan. I'd like to just remind everybody of something on the next chart. You know, we're trying to address the immediate need, and we know that ridership has been severely depressed, but where is ridership going to go? Well, McKinsey has projected that the new normal ridership level, by the time you get to 24 or 25, will be between 80% and 92% of the pre-pandemic levels. 86% is the midpoint. What you see on this chart, the red line is the worst case projection from McKinsey. The gold line is the best case projection, and the blue line there is the midpoint. And as you can see, the midpoint at 86%, if you were to bring that back, you can see that it's still significantly higher than the midpoint, the worst case, and in some cases the best point. So the thought here is we may need to right-size our service at some point in time. And it's a question of when do we want to start doing that? Again, the wolf isn't at the door this year, okay? But we do have to address our service levels to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the customer. And if the new normal is something less than pre-pandemic levels, it's a question of when do we start to address it and adjust. The last chart, and I put up here, it's a little hard to see, but this is just the budget. Our budget is $17.5 billion, 574 actually. You can see on the pie chart on the left, where do the dollars come from? And the two biggest pieces are on the northwest, I guess you could say, corner. That's the 24% for CRISA and FEMA, and then proceeds of the MLF is about 10%. A total of $5.8 billion coming in. And then where does the money go? The two pie charts on the right. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my comments.
Bob, thank you. Let me just make a couple of notes before I turn to commissioners for comments or questions, starting with Commissioner Law. As I said at the top of the meeting, and Bob just reflected in his discussion, the MTA has received extraordinary federal aid thanks to Majority Leader Schumer and the New York delegation. But as Bob also said, despite this critical financial support, including the borrowing of $3.4 billion in aggregate, we still have a long way to go and are still in need of $8 billion to address the deficits projected in the outer years of the financial plan, as Bob just described. The financial plan, February financial plan presentation is being presented as an informational item and does not require a board vote, but it includes technical adjustments to the MTA 2021 budget and the 21 to 24 financial plan. And with that, I'll turn to Commissioner Law, start with Commissioner Law.
Thanks, Pat. And thanks, Bob, to you and your team for everything you're doing and for keeping us informed. I just had one question. I was curious. I saw in the budget watch that was circulated yesterday that real estate transaction taxes are up and mortgage recording tax receipts are up compared to budget. And is that, do you have any evidence? Is that a sign that maybe we under budgeted and that's why we're better? Or are we seeing evidence that real estate transactions are picking up in the city, which would be a good sign for our recovery?
You know, estimating and budgeting is always difficult because you're going with the information you have at the time. We know that there is a depressed real estate market in the city. It does seem to be picking up. It may be a question of just prices dropping to a level that people are willing to commit. But right now, for 1 month, we're not ready to make any adjustments. We're going to continue to monitor this, watch it, see how it happens. And if we see a continuing and improving trend, we're going to reflect that in the July plan.
Thanks, Bob.
Commissioner Zuckerman.
Thank you. And thank you, Pat, for your leadership for these many months. It's extraordinary what you, thankfully, with the political winds changing in Washington, what you've been able to do for the MTA in the region. The financial health is it's an extraordinary change. And thank you for your advocacy, your consistency, and your results. I look at that, and Bob, of course, to you, you're a fiscal stalwart, and I think we're lucky every day to have you in this seat. There's two main drivers of our revenue and of our expense. On the revenue side, fare box is something we can control, and we thoughtfully deferred increases in fares, not tolls, at our last month's board meeting. And then clearly on the expense side, labor is our primary driver. Can you just confirm, A, what is in this 4-year view through 2024, 3-year view through 2024 related to fare box? And can you confirm what is related to wage increases, please?
Okay. On the fare box side, we do have 4% increases. We had it for this year, and we would have it for 2023 as well. And a 4% toll is built into the budget. That's kind of been our standard pattern. In terms of the labor, typically it's the 2% that we put in. We do take into account certain contracts, and we put into effectively a reserve for open contracts to be at that same level of settled contracts.
So can you just explain in that line that said wage freezes? Because it sounds like you added it back. You added the wage increases back in, therefore removing them. Did I misunderstand that line?
So what we did is we said, we're assuming that we're not paying, any contract increase or settling any new contracts at a higher level during this period going through 2022. So that is also a freeze on non-represented workers as well. So there is no increase built in through 2022.
Thank you.
Anybody else for Bob?
Yeah, Pat, I got a question for him.
Commissioner Brown.
It comes from Budget Watch, which I continue to believe is the most useful document that we put out. But let me quote from you my question here, and it has to do with saving money in overtime, which, believe it or not, I'm not opposed to. But the first item you mentioned in your overtime savings there, it says specifically lower than budget primarily from curtailed programmatic routine maintenance work. Now, that was not my understanding of what you generally refer to as waste, fraud, and abuse, or fat in the budget, or stuff like that. What programmatic routine maintenance are we curtailing to effectuate a lower overtime whack?
Yeah, Commissioner, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Bob Lynn.
Pat, thanks very much. Let me make several comments, if I could, at this point. First, let me start with the positive. I want to, again, like others, express my appreciation of the extraordinary work that, Pat, you have done, along with Bob Ferran and staff, along with Senator Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, and the work of John Samuelson in D.C., with the extraordinary success. I really think that it is extraordinary what you've achieved, and it looks certain, or virtually certain, that a lot more is going to be coming with the new administration, and I think that is simply terrific. I also want to say that according to Bob Ferran's report and the information of January in Budget Watch, it looks like things are moving up. Fare revenues are enhanced. Operating costs are reduced, including reduced overtime. I think that's also terrific results, and I want to express appreciation of the staff for doing that. I think the subway and bus mask wearing has been extraordinarily successful. And I want to praise Sarah Feinberg and Pat Warren for the extraordinary efforts to bring this. Who would have thought in New York City we'd have 97% compliance with mask mandates? And I think that is terrific and really provides a lot of feeling of security going into the subways. So I want to balance that, though, with some comments that I and I know other board members have been making. David Jones, along with I, have argued that the current board decision process needs to be enhanced. That we've complained of the failure to engage in robust debate and discussion options at board committee levels, and I think this has really diminished our decision process. I have pointed to a number of critical issues at the MTA where I thought that we really need greater security and debate and discussion. I know David Jones has talked about the MTA debt and how we're going to restart our capital plan needs substantial discussion. On fare evasion, we've talked about this for the year and a half I've been here, and each time we come back to it, it's like Groundhog Day. On the overtime, a major source of raised voices overtime, I have asked, and so far to no avail, for data, the type of data compiled by the Empire Center, so we can proactively look at the conduct of very high overtime owners, and we can look at supervision in that area. We have not been doing that. And even more, I'm perplexed by the current statements on MTA cops. There is no question that employee and public safety is critical, and that the most recent horrible incidents need to be dealt with. But far from a robust discussion of alternatives with the MTA board, we receive an email on Sunday night saying that the MTA wanted to hire 1,000, wanted the city to hire 1,000 additional cops above and beyond the 500 cops, and above and beyond the 500 cops that were authorized in 2019. The MTA cops were authorized by us, above and beyond the contractual agreement with the bridge and tunnel officers, where they were supposed to assist with fare evasion efforts. And I've heard no discussion, certainly saw none of the email, of why, given the importance of this, we haven't hired 300 of the 500 cops that the MTA authorized in 2019. And I gather it's now starting, but should have been part of this whole process. So I'm saying that it connects to the committee meetings. We need to stop thinking inside the box, and we need to look at the overall picture. Before we run to say that the city should go from 2,400 cops to 4,000 cops, I think we need to look at how the whole system has gotten to where we are. What has been the impact of homelessness, of empty trains and stations? And I keep hearing the conversation, oh, ridership is down, so crime should be down. I think it's the opposite. If stations are empty and cars are empty, no wonder crime is going up. Nighttime closings couldn't possibly have helped the safety situation. Reduced service can't possibly have helped the safety situation. It's all interconnected and needs to be resolved holistically. There needs to be a better combination of MTA and city police working together. We need to look at deployment, whether it's walking up and down the car, but it needs to be part of an overall system. Social workers, social service workers, non-uniform MTA workers. I know that President Utano has talked about station agents. What is their role? And most importantly, technology, CCTV, locked slam gates, 311, innovative approaches. We should be looking at what a transition of workforce to technology should look like. And all of these things are critical, and we need robust debate about this. And it's not going to come through this process. It's going to come through a robust committee process where we find 21st century solutions, rather than really only receiving last-minute emails as to what's happened. So I think the post-COVID-19 world gives an opportunity. We've all gone through a horrible, horrible situation, the workforce, the public, but we also have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to re-envision what public transit in New York metropolitan area should look like. And we're not going to get there unless we engage in the robust discussion of alternatives that we need to go back to. Thank you.
So, Bob, I'm just going to address a bunch of things there. First, with respect to our success in Washington, I think it's essential that we recognize the contributions of our labor partners, starting with John Samuelson, but all of them first. Second, obviously, Majority Leader Schumer and his staff, Speaker Pelosi, the entire congressional delegation and their staffs. Here, in addition, we can't overlook the work of Abby Collins and Jano and Kyla Hines and Naomi Rennick and others. And you're right, the results have been good today, to date, but I think that's a result largely of the righteousness of our case. And I think that happily policymakers in Washington have recognized that. Second, with respect to the 1,000 cops, we're not police officers. We're not suggesting or advocating hiring 1,000 police officers. What we have done is requested that of the mayor and the police commissioner that they direct 1,000 additional police officers to the transit system above the 500 or now 644 number that the police commissioner and Chief O'Reilly have spoken about. Clearly, there is a problem in the transit system from a safety and security point of view. I mentioned, condemning the attacks on police officers that Chief O'Reilly just reported, and I think we would all share that. Commissioner Kulisi and Commissioner Samuelson, I believe.
Thank you. I appreciate the time. I want to thank everybody for all their hard work in securing the federal funding, all the MTA workers and all the cops that are out there protecting us every day. I have a comment, and then I do have a question for Bob on some stuff. So first, I want to build on what Bob Lynn said. We certainly need to get back to committee meetings to be able to push this forward. We also need to look at the way that the public comments are put out there because people need some to really get the information to us, and that public comment period should be extended. And we also need to get the board books out a little bit earlier so we have enough time to read that. I do want to say that you did lead with the hiring of Quamel for the accessibility chief officer, so thank you for that. I know Quamel will make a big difference. He has a lot of work behind him, bridging the gap of accessibility, settling lawsuits, and more importantly, reaching out to the community and building on the successes that Alex L. Gooden had. So there's a lot of work to be done, and we welcome him, and I want to make sure he's successful as possible, and I believe the community wants to see that as well. So with that, Bob, I know there's been a lot of money coming in, and there's been a lot of people that have advocated for it. We're going to vote on something today in regards to more money coming into the system. Congestion pricing is out there as well, and things are looking really good. And what does that really mean for the 70 stations in the capital funding now that in the capital program now that we're receiving federal funding? So thank you.
Commissioner Kulisi, it's Jano Lieber. I'm going to be giving a report in a few minutes on the status of the capital program, but among other things, we are accelerating the restoration of a lot of projects that were put on hold during 2020. So that very much includes the ADA stations work, and I'll get into that.
Commissioner Samuelson.
Yeah, how you doing? Listen, there's still a lack of clarity on my part related to the discussion about wages and wage freezes, and the comments that Bob Ferran engaged in before. So just to be clear, TW Local 100 has a wage increase coming, a scheduled wage increase from a contract that's active right now in May. It cannot possibly be the position of the MTA that you're not gonna fulfill that obligation and pay that wage out. I'm correct about that, right?
The financial plan and the wage freeze would not have that being paid.
All right, so we've been down this road before. The MTA has done this to us before. We have a scheduled wage increase coming. We've prevailed in court. We've beat you. It's caused great animosity within the workforce. This very workforce, by the way, that you just had celebrities touting during this meeting. It's a bit of cognitive dissonance to have celebrities touting how great the workforce is and then stick it to us, shaft us by withholding a raise that's scheduled that we all entered into in good faith. And just putting all of that aside for a second, this is all going on in the midst of a $145 million swipe by New York State, which, by the way, is sufficient to pay those raises 2 or 3 times over And it's also sufficient to settle the outstanding contract that you have with TW 106, the bus dispatchers, who are now years and years without a contract and behind everybody else. So you're really engaging in a serious management error here to expect that this workforce is going to keep producing the way it does while you shaft us and withhold a raise that we entered into in good faith. Just think about it if it was the other way around. Think about if we stop fulfilling our obligations under that contract. You know what you'd do? You'd run to a judge. And that's exactly what we're going to do if you don't pay the money out. And I strongly urge you to reconsider this before this trickles down to some sort of industrial effect on the tracks and in the bus system, because that's what's going to happen organically. And that's what transit workers do. Every time you stick it to them, they stick it back to you tenfold, and you never seem to learn a lesson. It's like we've seen this movie before. I've said it at MTA board meetings before. It's like Groundhog Day, the movie. It happens over and over again, and you never seem to learn a lesson. So again, I strongly urge you to reconsider that position. Thank you.
Anybody else for Bob? Then next, we're going to go to Mark Young, Vice President and CFO at the Long Island Railroad. And Mark has served as a lead on this cycle of fare and toll policy review, and he and his team, I think, have done an extraordinary job. Mark's going to introduce the toll proposal. Mark, over to you.
All right. Good morning, Chairman Foy and Commissioners. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. So I know you've received a good deal of materials in the forms of staff summaries, resolutions, etc., that we'll likely be voting on in a few moments. But we thought we would just go through a quick, only 5-slide PowerPoint, which I think does a good job of summarizing the proposal before you and putting it into context. As I always do when I start, I do want to give a shout out and thanks to the staff, particularly B&T staff and MTA Finance, Legal, and Government Affairs for really working so hard over the last few months to get to this point. It's really a great team. So we can move to the first slide. So just as a quick refresher, and we've talked a little bit about this already, the February plan, the financial plan, already assumes a 4% revenue yield from fares and tolls and incorporates the worst case scenarios that Bob Foran has spoken about that have come to us from McKinsey as far as fares and tolls and usage of our system. And on this slide, you see the actual numbers in the financial plan. So that 4% for tolls, that 4% yield was expected to generate $48 million in 2021 and $78 million in 2022. And the way the financial plan is crafted, it assumed a March 2021 implementation of the toll increase. And just for some historic context, you can see in the past 2 cycles at the bottom here, in 2019, we approved a 6% yield on tolls, 4% on fares. And in 2017, it was a 4% yield on tolls and a 4% yield on fares. We can move to the next slide. Of course, we engaged in a very I'd say energetic public input process. We issued our public notice after the November board meeting, and as part of we had our public hearings through the MTA. And in addition, we posted our policy options and proposals in the state register and sought comment through that process as well. That state process extended through February 16th of this month, just a few days ago, and there were no public comments received through that separate state process. That having been said, I know most of you participated in some or all of the MTA hearings we held in December. That was from a public input perspective, it was unprecedented. You received a memo from our government affairs group. I think the prior round, we had received a total of 600 comments on fares and tolls. This time we received, approximately 2,100 comments. So whether it was online or in various public settings. So it really shows how the new approach was effective in soliciting comment. What you see at the bottom here were, if you recall, we had a public notice, and these were the main options we were considering that we sought comment on. A base increase to the tolls. This is just focusing on tolls. Kind of an across the board increase of up to 8% yield. We sought comment on a varying pricing proposal where we might vary tolls by time of day or by type of crossing, and several other items that I'll cover in a few seconds. We can move to the next slide. Okay, so what you have before you in the documents that we'll be considering in a few moments is a proposal which contains a few different pieces. The biggest piece is sort of the baseline toll increase that's summarized on this slide. So this proposal would generate a 6% revenue yield in tolls for the MTA. Which translates into $116 million in the first full year of implementation, which would be 2022. In order to generate a 6% revenue yield, the actual average increase on the tolls factoring in ridership changes is about, on average, 7.08%. So what you see on this slide, and again, this slide and this table is not discussing discounts, resident discounts and rebates. I'll get to that on the next slide. This is just a summary of the basic toll that a non-resident discount customer would save. So I'll just focus, all the bridge types and crossings are here, but I'll focus on the major crossings for the purposes of this. So if you look at the top, which is in blue, those are New York City Easy Pass customers. To cross a major crossing today, the toll is $6.12. Applying this increase to generate the 6% yield would result in a toll going to $6.55. If you move to the green section, just sticking with major crossings, for non-New York City Easy Pass customers, their toll would go from the current $9.50 to $10.17. So I'm not going to go through all the other crossing types here, but that's the methodology, and that's how the math works for this proposal. And again, this is just for the basic Easy Pass and non-Easy Pass toll, not including resident discounts. We can move to the next slide. Of course, there was a lot of discussion about the Staten Island resident discount and rebate program at the public hearings. And as the chairman recently indicated, it was a clear direction that the board wished to not eliminate the discount and rebate programs, which is what we had included in the public notice. So what this proposal, what this table lays out is kind of the math of what the chairman indicated in his opening comments. So the increase that a resident, this is the Staten Island discount here and rebate program, the increase that these residents would see is the same as what it would be is being witnessed and experienced by everyone else in the system. There's no elimination in the resident discount or rebate program. So with that in mind, if you look at this at this table, I know we often talk about the resident discount. It's actually, that toll is the product of both the discounted rate and a rebate that is separately provided to keep the toll down for these residents. So what you see in the middle column there is today, after discounts, a Staten Island resident would pay $3.44 to cross the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. And with the rebate that we provide, which is 69 cents per trip, they currently pay $2.75. In the proposal that we are considering today, that $3.44 discounted rate would go up by roughly the amount we need for the 6% yield. So it would go to $3.68. We would slightly increase the rebate from 69 cents to 73 cents, which would result in a post-rebate toll for Staten Island residents of $2.95. So that 20-cent difference is the figure that Chairman Foy mentioned previously. At the bottom, there's no table for this because we didn't think it was necessary, but the Cross Bay Bridge would continue to be fully rebated for Rockaway and Broad Channel residents. So those residents would still not see a effective toll for crossing that bridge. And that has been historically a policy decision by the MTA because the Cross Bay Bridge is a bridge that connects two locations that are within the same borough of Queens. We can go to the final slide. And these were some other policy options that we've included in the package that we've considered. And these were, I have to say, particularly important to the agency, B&T, Bridges and Tunnels, largely because of the financial environment that we're in and the opportunity they create to improve efficiency and generate some expense savings. So the first item is establishing a new mid-tier rate. So what we're trying to do here is incentivize customers who have easy passes to properly mount their tags in their vehicles when they cross our crossings. Unfortunately, what happens today is if a customer fails to properly mount their tag, there's a very laborious process that the agency must engage in to use imaging to try to track down these customers and identify them. And even after all of that is done, the toll they're ultimately charged is the same Easy Pass toll they would have paid originally. So what the concept here is to establish a new rate that is the midpoint between the Easy Pass rate and the non-Easy Pass rate. So it's slightly higher than what they pay today, but it's a slightly higher because we're trying to encourage customers to more frequently properly mount their tags. And what it will do, I mean, the primary benefit here is that it will allow the agency to save approximately $4.9 million per year in operating expenses. And just for a real number, just so you have a real number in your head, for a major crossing, this mid-tier rate would be the midpoint between the 655 and the 1017 I mentioned before, which would be $8.36. That's the new mid-tier rate. The last item here is the elimination of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge carpool discount. So I do want to be clear, this is not eliminating the carpool lane. From an operations perspective, the carpool lane will still exist. Customers can still use that. This is just about the discount program that has been provided only to Staten Island residents on the bridge. Which gives them a $1.70 toll each way. So again, this is a situation that has become difficult to manage at the agency in a cashless environment. What we count on and the agency counts on is for customers to essentially flip a switch on their tag to indicate they have at least 3 passengers in their vehicle. And needless to say, enforcement of this has become very difficult and challenging, particularly in the open road tolling environment. So the recommendation here is to no longer provide this special discount, and these customers would pay the rebated Staten Island discount rebated amount I discussed previously. And again, this is not a very highly used program. You can see that there were only 13,000 active users I think it was in the month of November of 2020. And so this is not a widespread program for B&T. And again, it does allow the agency to save approximately $1.4 million in expenses annually. That is the summary of the package that is before you. Happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Hey, Mark, let me suggest this. Why don't you take the board and the public through the board action items and then open it up to board questions and discussions?
Sure. Okay. So I know it's very important that I be very precise and present this in a proper order. So I'm actually going to read this from some notes. So there's 5 action items before you. The first 2 resolutions have to do with the crossing charge increases at TBTA's bridges and tunnels. And the remaining 3 resolutions have to do with adjustments to the MTA rebate programs at the Verrazano Narrows Bridge and the Cross Bay Veterans Memorial Bridge. The first item is a TBTA resolution that involves the analyses and determinations made in the environmental assessment that was required and the negative declaration prepared under the State Environmental Quality Review Act. And it states that the proposed increases to the crossing charge schedules will have no significant adverse impact on the environment. And it authorizes and directs the TBTA president or his designee to execute the negative declaration. And it finds that the proposed crossing charge increases are just and reasonable, as discussed in that report. The second resolution is a TBTA resolution that repeals the prior crossing charge schedule itself for use of the TBTA's bridges and tunnels facilities and authorizes the TBTA president or his designee to take all such steps that may be necessary and desirable to establish, implement, and permanently adopt the new crossing charge schedules attached to the resolution. The third resolution is an MTA resolution that the proposed adjustments to the MTA's Verrazano Narrows Bridge and Cross Bay Veterans Memorial Bridge rebate programs will have no significant adverse impact on the environment under the meetings of SECRA. And it adopts and approves a negative declaration authorizing and directing the MTA chairman or his designee to execute the negative declaration. And that the adjustments to the MTA toll rebate programs at these bridges are found to be just and reasonable, as discussed in the report. The fourth resolution is for the approval of the adjustments to the MTA's Verrazano Narrows Bridge rebate programs to provide a 73-cent rebate of the toll amount for registered Staten Island residents using their New York Customer Service Center EasyPass tag at the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, and a 15% rebate of the toll amount for eligible trucks and other commercial vehicles using the EasyPass tag, New York City EasyPass tag, at the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. And that if funds are not available at the time and in the amount necessary to effectuate the credit, participants in the Verrazano Narrows Bridge Staten Island resident rebate program would be charged the applicable resident discount toll rate without such further rebate. And trucks and other commercial vehicles in this commercial rebate program would be charged the applicable New York Customer Service Center EasyPass toll rate without such further rebate for their trips across the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. And the resolution also authorizes the MTA chairman in consultation with the TBTA president to make such changes, alterations, modifications, and revisions to the rebate programs, including the adjustment of the amount and or percentage of either rebate without further resolution. The final and fifth resolution is for the approval of the adjustments to the MTA's Cross Bay Veterans Memorial Bridge rebate program to increase the current rebate amount to $1.60 toward an increased $1.60 toll amount for registered Rockaway and Broad Channel residents using their New York Customer Service Center Easy Pass at the Cross Bay Veterans Memorial Bridge, resulting in an effective fully rebated toll of $0. And to provide that if funds are not available at the time and the amount necessary to effectuate the credit to the participants in the program, these participants would be charged the applicable resident discount toll rate without such further rebate for their trips. And that the MTA chairman, in consultation with the TVTA president, is authorized to make these changes, alterations, modifications, and revisions to the rebate program, including the adjustment of the amount and a percentage of the rebate without further resolution. So that's a mouthful, but I did summarize it in the PowerPoint, the key points of that, of the resolutions.
All right, Mark, thank you. Let's start with board comments. Commissioner Albert, Commissioner Glucksman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the mid-tier rate that you're suggesting. If we want to encourage drivers to put their Easy Pass tags in the appropriate places, shouldn't they be charged the full rate if they don't mount them properly? I could see perhaps if they have one mislocated tag, they might get the mid-tier rate. But if they're habitual people who are not placing their tag in the appropriate position, shouldn't they be paying the full rate? That's actually my question.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's a very good question. It's certainly something we discussed during our deliberations. I think this is the first time we're establishing this new rate. So we're kind of, I don't want to say dipping our toe in the water, but we're kind of making our first step here. I think an important thing to just keep in mind that, that we feel is an important factor in not going to that full amount that you've suggested or potentially proposed is that we are trying to keep customers in the Easy Pass, with Easy Pass. Easy Pass is a very valuable account-based system. And so we tried to create this new tier in the middle between not having an Easy Pass at all or having an Easy Pass. The fear was, or the concern was, if we just charged everybody a non-Easy Pass rate, there would be no inducement for people to even retain their Easy Passes. So we looked to find a middle ground, and that's why we recommend this mid-tier rate, at least at this present time.
Okay, if the owner of an Easy Pass were to lend it to somebody else and then it wasn't visible when that particular person used an MTA crossing, and that became a habit for this person, obviously you're actually not gaining another Easy Pass user. If somebody's just lending them their Easy Pass tag. So you have to consider all of these things, obviously. If somebody is a habitual non-placement, non-correct placer of their tag, I think you might want to look further into it if you have the ability to do that.
Point well taken. I know, I think, as we go through with this process, we introduce this new tier. We'll be exploring its impact on, what we're seeing from the customers. And if we need to come back and consider something else, I'm sure we'd be open to doing that.
So you will be watching for habitual incorrect placements.
I certainly know Danny DiCrescenzo is on the phone from an operations perspective, but I do believe that's keeping track of and monitoring usage, and if it's proper, I think is a fundamental piece of what the operation does every day. But certainly, President DiCrescenzo, is there anything you would add to that?
Hey, Danny, would you speak to the app and third-party issue, please, just briefly?
Yeah, I was first going to say, Commissioner, we were looking at, this is for people that have a customer service, a New York customer service tag. So New York, New Jersey, or the throughway tag, that their license plates associated with their tag, they go through, they don't have their tag up. We take a picture of their plate, the plate gets associated with an Easy Pass account, and then there's back office costs that goes with that because they didn't have their tag up. And then and in the past they would get the better rate. So now what this does is it recoups our costs, and it gives a deterrent for that person that has that license plate associated with their tag already. So why not post the tag? So it's a deterrent for the person that shares the tag. I'm assuming that the license plate's not going to be associated with their Easy Pass, so they would automatically get the tolls by mail bill and get the higher rate, if I'm making sense.
You are making perfect sense. I get it. Thank you.
Okay, and as far as, Mr. Chairman, what you just mentioned, we have the Tolls New York app now that's out there. We suggest that all our customers download that app on their device in Google Play or in the App Store, and you can monitor your tolls by mail. You can monitor your Easy Pass account. You can actually even request an Easy Pass, and we're hoping that if and when the tolls get approved by you, that we're going to be pushing out that, hey, save 40%, get an Easy Pass. It's the best way for us to capture our customers and make sure that their accounts are good. And I think it's the best way for our customers to save money out there.
Thanks,
Mr.
Danny.
Chairman, let me touch on something else too. I'm sorry.
No, Danny, that's good. Commissioner Glucksman, please.
Yeah, I think that my question got answered. I was going to thank Mark for his very in-depth report, but he kept saying New York City Easy Pass, New York City Easy Pass. So I was wondering, because my Easy Pass is from the Thruway, but Danny said that the Thruway people get also the discounts. So am I correct, Danny?
Yeah, it's a New York customer service tag, which is Thruway Port Authority or the MTA.
I thought so, but thank you for clearing it up.
Good. Any other questions for Bob?
Yeah, just a technical question. The reason you're using 7.08% is not because of the delay, it's because of the actual revenue that comes in. You need a higher percentage to get the 6% net. Is that correct?
Yes, so Commissioner, we do this for fares and tolls, as you probably know. So we need to factor in elasticities, ridership and bridge usage elasticities when we calculate the impacts of fare and toll increases. So for the purposes of tolls, we worked with a third party to do a market analysis as part of the environmental assessment. And what that analysis shows is that for each 1% increase in tolls, we should expect traffic drops by about 0.15%. So if we have to factor that math in when we're looking to hit a revenue yield of 6%, the actual toll increase has to be slightly higher, which is the 7.08% to offset the small traffic loss.
Thank you.
All right, good. I will make the motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much. The items carry. I'm now going to turn over the floor to our learned General Counsel, Tom Quigley, to introduce the all-agency responsibility guidelines. Tom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The all-agency responsibility guidelines complement the all-agency procurement guidelines. Essentially, they set the standards for staff to apply in evaluating contractors and vendors to determine if they're responsible and qualified to do business with the MTA. And although the procurement guidelines have been updated multiple times over the years, most recently this past July, the responsibility guidelines have not been updated since 2010. And we thought it was time to update and modernize the guidelines. Actually, the genesis of this project was in a working group of this board to bring the guidelines, the responsibility guidelines, up to date. In your staff summary, you will see a summary of the proposed changes to the guidelines that we're recommending. Also attached is a red line version to show the actual changes in language to the guidelines that we're asking you to vote on today. Very briefly, just a couple of the highlights. Bear in mind that all contractors are required to self-report and complete questionnaires to identify any kind of adverse information. But in addition, we had been doing independent investigations for procurements. The threshold had been $250,000 that was set back in 2010. We are proposing to raise that to about $1 million. That about 79% of our procurement contracts are under $1 million, and that would free up a significant amount of resources, not having to do that independent investigation, but of course the contractors are required to self-report. It would streamline our process. We propose giving the agency president some discretion. Their discretion right now in terms of waiving the guidelines is at $1 million. We propose extending it to $3 million. There are situations where we have recommended that an integrity monitor be imposed on a contractor. We have never had standards before. We have now added some standards so that we have uniformity in what criteria should be met before an integrity monitor is proposed. Also, we've modified the threshold for significant subcontracts that would require an investigation as well. Not just, we've narrowed the scope a bit to require significant subcontracts that are both over $1 million and 10% of the contract, or significant subcontracts which are $5 million. And again, these are contractors that don't have direct privity with the MTA but are hired through the contractor. That's a general summary. The more detail is in your staff summary and in your board book, and we'd recommend that you approve these revisions.
Thank you. Any questions for Tom? I'll make a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you very much. The action carries. I'm now going to ask Jano Lieber to provide an update on C&D and the Capital Program Oversight Committee. Jano.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an update on the 2021 commitment plan for capital. Before we get started into the commitments for 2021, I want to review the situation which came up in the course of Bob's presentation a little bit with respect to the 2020 to 2024 capital program funding. The good news is that we're getting the funding sources back on track, and I'm going to quickly take you through the pie chart just to show you where we are. Throughout 2020, federal funding was the primary source of funding, along with bridges and tunnels, tolls, of course. And it was through those two sources that we advanced the 2020 to 24 capital program to the extent we could. That limitation was, of course, because of the COVID impacts on the MTA budget. The federal funding and the bridges and tunnels tolls remain the most secure source of funding, and together they represent about 20% of our 2020 to 24 capital program. But things are starting to look up. A major step forward in rebuilding or reconstituting the capital program was the 2021 governor's executive budget, in which the state recommitted to its $3 billion contribution to the MTA 2020 to 24 capital program. And in addition to that, the state also redoubled its commitment to the existing 15 to 19 program, and that is important because a lot of the projects that I have underway, that we all have underway right now, are 15 to 19 program projects. So that state commitment brought us to 26% of our original capital program as approved by you and by the state legislature and the governor at the outset of 2020. Then, with the state's commitment, we are counting on the city to follow suit with its $3 billion commitment, which was, of course, enshrined in the prior state budget. We're confident in this, especially since the Biden administration's COVID rescue plan calls for significant resources to be directed to cities directly, as well, of course, to states. So that's another 6% back in the hopper, we believe. Then turning to capital from what we call the new revenue sources. This is the roughly $10 billion of the original program that was meant to come from the new mansion tax and the new internet sales tax. This is a category that had been reallocated to cover operating needs. And it was this is a redirection of capital dollars to operating that was alluded to by one of the public commenters, Alita Dupree, at the outset of this meeting. Our expectation now is that with the Biden administration, significant COVID relief funding that is in the bill that's in process, that this funding source, these new dedicated revenues, will now be able to be available for the capital program starting in 2022, next year. And this is another funding area that will be determined. The exact amount of this is going to be determined by economic conditions that we're also talking about. But we are optimistic that the vast majority of this will be available and that we will be able to bond against it starting sometime in 2022. That brings us all the way back to 50% of where we started at the beginning of last year. Then the Second Avenue Subway. The Second Avenue Subway grant application, which is $2.9 billion, has been sitting with US DOT for over a year and a half. It's like the Central Business District tolling application, just sat unacted upon by the prior administration. And we're confident that the new administration is going to be more responsive and advance this important project, which has been promised, I always remind people, to the people of East Harlem since the 1940s when they knocked down the 2nd and 3rd Avenue Ls. So we really have an equity obligation, a moral obligation to make good on it, and we are confident. The governor has really pushed this with the feds, and we're confident that this is eventually going to come through. When we receive that commitment, it will add another 5% to our capital program. The two big remaining pieces of the puzzle are Central Business District tolling, the bonding, the $15 billion that we bonded against, and our MTA bonds. On the Central Business District tolling front, the good news is that in recent weeks we've heard from Federal Highway Administration that they are going to fast track our environmental process, which will certainly put us moving forward towards being able to realize on this expected source of funds, and equally important to institute Central Business District tolling. So while we don't have certainty about the exact timeline, there's hope that this funding stream is going to be restored by the end of this capital program, and we hope well in advance of the end. So that's another $15 billion, bringing us to $40 billion. And the final piece is the close to $10 billion of MTA fair-back bonds, which obviously with low ridership and uncertainty about many variables in our financial future is somewhat uncertain. We don't know what exact amount will be available. Bob Ferran is really the expert in managing this aspect of our financial picture. But we do know, just from what I've already presented, that we're in a position to restore an ambitious capital program that attacks many of the priorities that you all set for this 2024 capital program. And this is all before we take into account the possibility of a significant stimulus initiative from Congress, and the Biden administration is already moving forward on it. That would add extra money, and not to be forgotten, if and when that does happen, that's an opportunity to start to address and correct the historical shortchanging of New York in the federal transportation formulas. These will be on the table when that bill hopefully comes to fruition soon. So now that we've talked about the big picture funding scenarios, I'm going to quickly take you through our planned commitments for this year. The bar chart shows that our 2021 commitment goal is $6.2 billion. That is a floor. So as some of the variables that I've talked about become clearer, when money is going to come back to the capital program, when we can bond certain revenues, we expect to be able to grow that 6.2, and we're hoping that we're going to get some north of 7 and maybe into the 8s or even the 9s to do that. We can push this number up billions more. We are moving, as I've said again and again, we are moving a lot of design forward in anticipation of being able to procure it if there is money available and to grow the overall program. This chart, this slide just shows you the commitment goals by agency, which are pretty much distributed not dissimilar from the capital program at large, especially when you take into account the big expansion projects. And quarter by quarter, what the quarter by quarter analysis shows you is that we will be ramping up as the year goes on. That's because the pipeline had to be virtually shut down during the second half of 2020 while the capital program was, the new capital program was on pause. And so we have to catch up the procurement on a lot of this work, and it's going to take most of 6 months to do it. But the program, as we are moving it forward, includes state of good repair, always is the first priority, especially safety-sensitive work, a ton of in-house work, leveraging our employees and what they do, and resignaling ADA stations and the Grand Central train shed, which needs a lot of attention and investment. So we're going to keep investing in those priorities. I'm going to go very quickly because of time. Stations. What's in the 6.2? Well, you're going to have at least 9 stations, including 3 at 14th Street. We're going to, we finished 11 new ADA stations last year. We're going to try to get every year into double figures in terms of new projects that we start. That's a priority. Along with new ADA stations, we're going to be replacing 16 elevators at existing ADA stations. We have to make sure that those stations stay functional. Infrastructure, $3.25 billion, not sexy stuff, but we must make the investments to ensure we don't let the system decline as it did after the financial crisis of 2008 through 2012. And we have significant investments planned in that. And track, which is the center of any state of good repair project or program, we have to avoid the conditions that led to the subway action plan a few short years ago. Fortunately, we do, as I say, have tremendous in-house capacity to maintain track and signals, and we're going to invest in that. Bridges and tunnels had an amazing 2020 where they did a ton of accelerations, taking advantage of what was for a while low traffic on their facilities. They got Verrazano Bridge approaches done. They did the RFK link to the Harlem River Drive, a whole new ramp, huge success, and we're going to continue to invest in them, and we're spelling the Verrazano right. I checked, Mr. Alper. And as far as our completion goals, the final point that I want to make is we're planning this year to have the biggest completion year in MTA history. And that shows you a point that I think I've made over the course of this difficult COVID year, which is that we never stopped the projects that were ongoing when COVID hit. We kept every one of them going. Bob Ferran put us on a bit of a diet, but there was always enough to keep the projects that were underway going. And the result is we will have the best year of completions ever. Credit the contractors and the union workforce that bought into we can work safely, because we've had incredible success keeping projects going, relatively low rates of infection, and a lot of innovation in how we accomplish work using remote video and so on and so on. So credit to our partners in labor and trade unions, as well as to the contractors for allowing us to get so much done and to continue to deliver. Thank you, and I'll take questions. If there are any, there's a CPOC section of your book, of course, and I and the IEC are available for questions.
Questions for Jano?
This is Victor.
Victor.
Thank you. So thank you, Jano. I always love seeing you present on things, and you're always keeping accessibility in the forefront of your mind, and I appreciate that. And I like the fact of replacing elevators, because we certainly need those existing stations to run well, and also including new stations is something that we need to move forward. And I just want to bring attention to the ADA compliance report in the board book. It shows that the MTA has not met the time frame of making the 100 key stations accessible by July of last year, and I'm certainly hoping that the remaining 3 key stations can be accelerated as quickly as possible. I know you've done some creative things during the pandemic, and I'm just hoping that that can be applied there so we can move forward on that. And then additionally, I would certainly like a board briefing on the plan for people with disabilities and the central tolling congestion pricing. So thank you.
You bet. And as you know, one of the stations that I mentioned that we've actually gone out to bid on already, 14th Street, is one of those 100 key stations, and we're very focused on that element of the ADA program, Commissioner.
Commissioner Glucksman.
Yes, thank you. I always like your reports too. It's nice to see the work that's going on. I had one question. 14th and 6th also has a path station. Are they involved at all in this project?
As far as I know, but I'm going to check now that you pointed out.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we can always use some of their money.
Commissioner Lynn.
Now, let's ask a question. What is the best metric, Jano, to figure out how far we've come back as a percentage of what we thought we were going to do? So if the initial plan was to do X in 21, and if it was a 12-month loss, then we do nothing, which obviously we haven't done. Is there a way of some sort of batting average we could all look at to look at what is the percentage back we are of where we thought we would be?
Yeah, good question. One metric is that we finished 2020 with 5.3 billion of new commitments, and we had planned. I think I announced it to this board about a year ago or in February to do 13 and change. So we're behind, quote unquote, $8 billion. We have an opportunity to catch some of that up, but right now we're behind in just terms of new commitments to the tune of $7 or $8 billion. We can. There are some constraints in the procurement process on how much industry can do, and frankly, how many outages we can have going on simultaneously in terms of impact on our shuttle bus capacity in addition to track outages. But we will report to you regularly on where we are in the path towards getting back to the goal that was set at the outset of 2020.
Thank you.
Sorry, Bob. Commissioner Cortez Vasquez and then Commissioner Albert.
Okay, thank you so much, Pat. Thank you so much, Eva, for this, for the report. I have a question, and it's a capital question, and it is an accessibility question. There is a string of stations, I believe 5 of them, between on the number 6 line in the Bronx on the elevated trains between Parkchester and Pelham Bay, all of which are inaccessible. And I don't know, because I'm new to the board, what is the capital plan for making those stations accessibility? Because right now, that is what we consider a NORC, which is a high concentration of older people live in that particular district. And accessibility obviously is an issue. And I was very pleased when we heard our new director of accessibility, or whatever the appropriate title was, to mention aging as one of the categories that he is going to be focusing on. So can you just inform me if this is something that has been discussed prior to my coming onto the board? I apologize. And if it's not, I would like the information now.
So what I'll do is I'm going to send you a list with a map of all the stations that were in the 20 to 24 program, so you can see which of the stations in that stretch is included. And I visited in the last couple of weeks a station at 170th in Jerome, so there's definitely a focus on the north and northeast Bronx. The goal, as you probably recall, is to get to the point where you are never more than 2 stations away from an accessible station. That was a goal the MTA set a couple of years ago. And the 70 station selection process, which was done in tandem with disability advocates and other experts in a partnership approach, was purposed at attacking that issue, which is making sure we address the accessibility deserts where they are. We make significant progress towards the 2 stations away goal as quickly as possible. And at the same time, we're doing geographic equity and dealing with where the ridership is. So all those variables we're taking into consideration. I'm going to send you a map and a list so you can see for yourself.
Thank you so much.
if I can add something, Lorraine, the Middletown train station was the one that brought the disability lawsuit on the 6th
Oh,
train.
okay.
So it's on the list because that's where I grew up and where I go every day. So.
Okay, great. Good, good. And it's the line that I ride. So
Right.
thank you. Bye. Thank you very much.
Andrew.
Thanks. Jana, we do love your reports. It's very encouraging to see what can be happening. My question is, what determines which, do you have metrics that determine which projects will go forward and which will stay suspended pending the resumption of the full capital program?
Well, part of what was done when we had the consolidation of C&D was also this idea that we were going to try to use, and this came out in the Crow report. Remember the forensic audit that was performed by Crow, that accounting outfit? So what is being done now is that we're systematically using, and the system's still in development, we're systematically using asset condition data, asset criticality data. I'm not an expert in this area, but EAM, Enterprise Asset Management data, is now being fed into our planning and prioritization system. So that's one variable. Another variable is, frankly, which projects are further along the curve or being ready to go in terms of design. And the third variable is, of course, our ability to, in terms of the contracting community and our outage, our capacity to manage the railroads, plural, as we do all this work by planning outages and so on. So there's a continuum of issues, and those are all being factored in as we look, which projects go in which order.
I mean, that makes perfect sense, but just as you heard from Commissioner Cortez Vasquez about the stretch between Pelham Bay and Parkchester not having accessible stations, is need one of those perceived reasons to choose a project or to balance out a particular line or to make it maybe no more than 2 stations away from an accessible location?
It's a fair point. When I use the phrase criticality, it includes that issue of how urgent the requirement for what that project delivers is. Yes.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you, Jano. Michael Gardner is here to discuss the Diversity Committee items. The Department of Diversity and Civil Rights continues to do tremendous work under Michael's leadership, helping deliver on the MTA's commitment to support and serve a diversity of suppliers across the region and to meet Governor Cuomo's 30% goal. This month, we also celebrate and recognize Black History Month and the long history and significant contributions of African American leaders and colleagues to our agency. I want to thank Michael and his team every month for their leadership throughout the year in supporting MWBEs, creating opportunities for small businesses, generating jobs, and economic growth across the region. Michael, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Chairman Foy, and thank you for your continued support. It is my understanding that we're going to show a video. The MTA's MWBE program was highlighted on PBS last month in honor of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. Our program was focused and aligned with his vision for economic and social empowerment and justice, in addition to economic empowerment. Dr. King was focused on social justice and economic opportunities. He was assassinated in April of 1968 because he was marching with the sanitation workers in Memphis, and they were protesting for the achievement of a living wage. And so the principles of Dr. King are extolled here in the state of New York and here at the MTA. We take pride in the contracts that we are awarding, and we are awarding a record number of contracts to New York State certified MWBE firms. Having the ability to take government, take taxpayer-funded projects, and award contracts in an inclusive manner to a pool of businesses who have historically been shut out, that is social justice and economic empowerment.
McKissick is the nation's oldest Black-owned design and construction firm. It started with the first ancestor who came to this country as a slave in 1790. And I want to make sure that we continue to deliver on the excellence we have been delivering for over 100 years. Over the last almost 30 years, we have built a business through the MWBE programs. The MTA has been instrumental in our growth. There was a surge and focus on how to get minority and women-owned businesses in prime roles. Opportunity arose to be the independent engineer of the MTA. We put our hat in the ring at an interview. They began to understand that a firm with a leader that looks like me could actually do this work. And they took that chance. Now, we have been the independent engineer for 10 years.
The diversity programs are extremely important because access to government contracts equals home ownership, job creation in those areas that have historically been excluded, better educational opportunities, better healthcare options, and an avenue to the middle class.
It was definitely a game changer. It allows us to control our destiny, to set the cultures of our company, to hire other brown and black professionals and females. We can now point to the work at the MTA and say, this is our work. We were able to leverage this work to get other prime contracts. Now we have a national transportation group. And this all started with getting a firm foothold in New York that understood the values and the need for diversity with an agency like the MTA. When I think about Dr. King and how that relates to what I'm doing, I feel that I am living my dream.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was a change agent. As individuals, we also have the same ability and opportunity to become effective change agents in focusing on fairness and equity and inclusion. And I'm very optimistic as we move forward that this country will become the great nation that Dr. King had in his dream.
So I'm humbled and gratified that PBS and the governor's office aligned our program with the vision of the Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. And let me just say that the governor announced his MWBE results from last year. So $3.1 billion were paid to New York State certified firms, $3.1 billion. 25% of those dollars, or $772 million, came from this organization. And I just want to continue to thank the leadership of this organization, Chairman Foy, the whole entire MTA board, and Chairperson Herman, who runs our diversity committee. Thank you for your continued support. Let me also say that it's been a great month. I want to just also congratulate Chairman Foy and Sarah Feinberg of being honored by City and State as one of the top 100 leaders in the city of New York. I want to also thank my good friend Jano Lieber, who was just honored this week by City and State as being one of the top 50 Power Force people in construction. He was ranked second. My friend at the Port Authority, Rick Cotton, was ranked number 1. And yours truly, Mike Garner, was ranked number 15. Now, I'm not going to accept being ranked 15, but it's still a great testament by City and State. And Jano and I are going to work together to make sure that our capital construction projects are completed safely, timely, on budget, and inclusive of our MWBE goals. And we're not going to allow our third-party contractors to come in and separate our goal or try to choose one goal over the other one. Far too often I hear a lot of our contractors say, well, hey, listen, you know what, if you want this expedited contract completed, then relax the M&WBE goals. And the answer to that is no, we're not going to do that. We're going to finish our projects safely, timely, on budget, and inclusive of our M&WBE goals.
Michael, institutionally, we do not want to finish second to the Port Authority on anything.
No, not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Not at all. So, let me also say that we've had a very, very great year. A great month of Black History Month, and I'm inviting everybody to our Black History Month celebration that's being hosted by Chairman Foy next week, where we are going to have the Bronx DA, Darcel Clark, who is the first Black female DA in the state of New York, as one of our keynote speakers. The second keynote speaker is going to be Arva Rice, who is the president and CEO of the Urban League, and she's going to give us a presentation on the state of Black America. Let me jump to our MWBE metrics. With regard to business and diversity initiatives, we've reached out and touched 50 firms during this COVID-19 season. Out of those 50 firms, they were awarded $199 million in contracts. The DBE certification, in currently speaking, this year we've certified 72 firms. Last year that number was in fact 96. But once again, we are operating under COVID-19 conditions, and so I'm ready. We're ready to get back and to execute the mission of DDCR. Our workforce, fourth quarter of 2020 EEO activities, there are approximately 70,700 MTA employees. 12,700 are females, or 18%. 49.6 thousand is 70% are in fact minorities. 3% are veterans, and 349, or 0.5%, are employees with disabilities. Small Business Mentoring Program. Jano and our respective staffs are working together along with Sarah Feinberg and her staff to make sure that we have the ability to allocate the appropriate number of contracts to our Small Business Mentoring Program. Once again, this program was extended by the governor for the next 10 years, and the program has to be more than just written on paper. It has to be functionable. It's a New York state law, and we're going to do everything in our power to make sure that we have the opportunity to allocate projects to this program, so our pool of small businesses and MWDBEs have the opportunity to bid directly to us, North America's largest transportation network, as prime contractors, and not be regulated only to work as subcontractors. This way, we have changed the paradigm. We changed state law. Now these firms have the opportunity to be in control of their own destiny. We pay contractors in 10 days. We've hired one of the nation's largest black banks, Carver Federal Savings Bank. These firms have the ability to apply for loans up to $900,000 per contract. And so they are in control of their own destiny. And you do not grow MWBEs on subcontract opportunities. You grow them on prime contract opportunities. Last year, we awarded $34 million in contracts. This year, we're working to award between $70 and $80 million. And as Jano has indicated in our previous monthly meetings, that's going to be the floor and not the ceiling. And so we are in the midst of this year. This year, we will award the $500 million contract out of the Small Business Mentoring Program. So in 10 years, we are approaching $500 million in projects out of this program. Once again, Carver has issued 130 loans for $18.2 million and counting. Let's talk about the MWBE and SDOV contract compliance results. We are in the midst of our DBE goal, where we just increase our 18% annual goal up to 20%. That's going to result in additional millions of dollars being awarded to our DBE firms. We are currently at 15%, and the reason why we are at 15% is because of the lack of projects that were allocated to the Small Business Federal Program, which was Jano and I, once again, are working to change that. And also making sure that we have the ability to bring in DBEs and certify them, and then integrate them into our various programs. With regard to the MWBE numbers, we are currently at 29% during the first 3 quarters of this year. I'm very optimistic that we will achieve or exceed the governor's 30% goal this year for the first time in history. 29%. And we're going to do everything in the last 6 weeks to drive MWB inclusion to make sure that we achieve the governor's 30% goal for the first time in history. With regard to our SDVOB results, actually 25% of contracts awarded during the first 3 quarters of this year has been awarded to SDVOBs for a total of $28.5 million. And so we're not going to rest until we achieve the governor's 6%
SDVOB goes in this area. Let's talk about our capital construction projects. With respect to DBEs, we are achieving 14% out of 20%. MWBEs, we are achieving exactly 27%. And legal fees, as you all know, that we put an extreme focus on making sure that we are affording opportunities to New York State M and WBE law firms, and working with Counsel Quigley and his staff, we have increased that number from 4% in 2017. We were at 19.6%, or $9.9 million in payments to certified firms. This year, in the third quarter, we are at 15% and $7.3 million. And in a correspondence that I sent out to Tom Quigley and his staff, that if we have to borrow a analogy from a sports world, it's the fourth quarter. So let's put our full court press on to make sure that we maximize opportunities for M&WBE's law firms, and let's beat last year's metrics. With regard to asset fund managers, we are at 19%. So 19% of our assets are being managed by certified MWBE asset fund managers. In closing, once again, the MTA is ranked #1 when it comes to dollars paid to M&WBE firms in the state of New York out of 97. Last year, that number was $772 million on our New York State funded projects. In addition to dollars that were paid to MWBE firms on our FTA funded projects, that number was an additional $304 million. So for the first time in history, the MTA was responsible for $1.1 billion in MWBE payments last year. $1 billion. And the reason why that's important is because we're pushing job creation in the Black community, Latinx community, Asian American business community, and also women business community. And I would like to give a special shout out to Jano Lieber and his team, Steve P., who has simply taken over making sure and creating packages from $3 million to $24 million. And so when firms graduate out of our mentor program, Chairman Foy, they are now bidding and winning projects between $3 million and $24 million. And so what that is doing is creating more competition. It's driving prices down. And on a recent bid list that Steve had in fact organized, 8 firms out of the 14 firms on that list were certified MWBEs. It was won by a certified MBE, and his pricing came in under our internal engineer's estimate. And so we are moving this agency forward, and we have the best MWBE program in the nation, and we are going to continue to break records and create opportunities for firms who have historically been shut out. Thank you.
Hey, Michael, I just want to applaud the success of the effort. Leading the nation, I think, is a great place to be. I think, and I know you agree, we can do and have to do more. And I have every confidence we're very close to the governor's target, and I have every confidence we're going to exceed it. So I want to thank you for that. Any questions for Michael? Commissioner Herman.
Yes, good morning. Well, afternoon now. Michael, I'd just like to say congratulations to you and your team, and thank you for all you've done in spite of COVID to continue to move forward the MTA's MWBE and diversity programs, and kudos to how you work as a team with Jano and the other presidents to make these contracts and things happen. Thank you.
Thank you for your steadfast support as well. And I would be extremely remiss if I did not thank my staff who work nights, weekends, holidays, and sometimes they are doing the jobs of 2 and 3 other individuals because of our dire straits that we're in right now. And so the MWBE team at DDCR is second to none. They are the best at what they do in the nation. So thank them.
Terrific. Any other questions for Michael?
Mr. Chair, Linda Lacewell.
Commissioner Lacewell.
Thank you, sir. Michael, as Commissioner Herman did, I just really want to congratulate you and your team. The passion and the energy that you bring. The beauty of that video was showing the impact on real people, right? And the ripple effects of widening participation in our contracting system is not just about numbers on a contract, it's about people's lives and families and the job creation and the building of communities, of typically underserved communities. And all the more critical now, right, given the disparate impact of COVID and the economic decline on these same communities. So as we build back better, really exponentially important. And I'm individually so proud to be associated with your efforts at the MTA, and all kudos to you and your team.
Thank you.
Commissioner Colisi.
Thank you for your work on this. It certainly makes a big difference in the community as a whole. And I just want to say that now we have Quamel Arroyo on the team, and I think him pulling in some people with disabilities into that diversity would be great as well, because I know of a lot of Black disabled-owned businesses too that would like to participate in some of the MTA contracts. So thank you.
Yes, and thank you. And we recently spoke yesterday, and we agreed that when we are modernizing our subway stations, working with JANO to make sure that as we install elevators and escalators, that MWBEs are being a part of that process as well. So thank you.
Thank you. The minutes of the January joint meeting and minutes from each committee have been distributed to all members and available on the website to the public. Are there any corrections or omissions, Commissioner Albert?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, on page 14 under President Eng's report, where he's talking about new generators, it says to covert power instead of convert power.
We will make that change. Thank you for your diligence. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you. Any opposed or abstention? The minutes are approved. I'm now going to turn to Kathy Rinaldi for her report on Metro North Railroad. Kathy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Just with respect to Metro North service, we're off to a good start so far this year on train performance. January was a relatively quiet month with service delivery operating above goal at 98.2%, which was 0.8% better than last January, and we had no significant service disruptions during the month of January. During that same period of time, west of Hudson service operated at 93.7%. The month of February started with a powerful nor'easter, which brought blizzard-like conditions to our service territory. But as always, Metro North employees rallied to the cause and remained on site for the duration of the storm. As the storm made its way throughout the region, our crews worked hard throughout the day and into the night, spreading salt, clearing surfaces of snow and ice, removing fallen trees, keeping signal switches and third rail clear, and preparing our trains for service. And thanks to their efforts, we were able to resume regular service less than 12 hours after we implemented a temporary shutdown during the storm. So to the awesome and dedicated workforce of Metro North, who are out there doing what it takes to get the job done, I want to offer many, many thanks on behalf of our customers and the entire region. Since the nor'easter, as we all know, there have been a parade of storms throughout the month of February. Nevertheless, our service delivery remains strong at 97.3% as of yesterday. We have another snowstorm hitting the region today into tomorrow, and our crews are ready as we prepare to handle whatever Mother Nature throws our way. Speaking of our dedicated employees, I want to acknowledge Dan Delgado, who is now part of the C&D family, but who began his employment as an associate engineer in the Metro North Associate Engineers Program 5 years ago. He can now proudly call himself a Railway Age 2021 Fast Tracker Under 40 honoree. Dan was selected by Railway Age for this year's 20 Under 40 Awards program. The annual awards are presented to top railroaders under the age of 40 in the US, Canada, and Mexico for making an impact in their field or within their companies. Since graduating from high school, it was always Dan's dream to be part of Metro North. So when he became an associate engineer in 2017, it was like winning the lottery for him. And it didn't take long for Dan, who is only 25 years old, to make a positive impression with his fellow railroad colleagues. Since then, Dan has played an integral role on many MTA and Metro North capital endeavors, including our on-call paving project, our Harlem 125th Street lighting project, and most recently, he managed the all-important Ossining roof replacement project, a restorative effort that brought the historic station back to life. On behalf of the entire MTA family, I want to congratulate Dan on this well-deserved achievement. Just a few words on the mask force. At the end of January, I was at North White Plains Station as part of MTA's most recent mask force event. I was joined there by State Senator Shelley Mayer, Assembly Member Chris Burdick, and our own superhero Metro Man. We all know by now how important it is to wear a mask while out in public. But for those who still need to be reminded, we teamed up with those elected officials in Metro Man to help with mask distribution and safety tips. It's always great to thank our customers in person for wearing their masks when they're riding the railroad, and to have our helpful staff out there every day to assist any customers who may have forgotten their masks at home. Station ambassadors continue to assist customers at some of our major outlying stations, and ushers and GCT are there to provide assistance and masks for anyone who needs one. With vaccines and expanded testing, we have new hope this year as we continue to battle this public health crisis. Speaking of vaccinations, as of yesterday, more than 900 Metro North frontline employees have already received the first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. This number represents approximately 21% of the employees who expressed an interest in getting vaccinated. Frontline employees continue to roll up their sleeves to receive the vaccine at the Javits Center, and we look forward to expansion of the vaccination program. While we continue to see a downward trend on the positivity rate for COVID-19, we continue to offer all employees COVID-19 testing as we remain focused on the safety of our customers and our employees. A few words on Black History Month. In honor of Black History Month, Metro North is celebrating with a video series that highlights 2 and sometimes 3 generations of Black American families at the railroad. The history of each family and how they came to be working from one generation to the next at the railroad speaks to our diversity, but also to their unique history and the family dynamics which were explored in these series. We're featuring Elania Tucker, who started at Metro North in 2012 as a conductor and who is now working in the training department where she does block training. Her father also worked at Metro North, and her grandfather, Robert Tucker, who retired in 2004 and in his 80s, became one of the first Black American conductors at Metro North in 1983 after starting with the New Haven Railroad in 1962. Then we also have Dwayne McNeil, who's a conductor on the Hudson Line, who started out as a coach cleaner in 2013, and his father, Wayne McNeil, who retired last January after beginning his railroad career as a third railman for Conrail at the age of 19. Wayne served as a foreman, an engineer, a train master, and a training officer, and ended his career as deputy director of training for Metro North. Prior to his retirement, Wayne is credited with having created the locomotive engineer training simulation room and implementing PTC training for our engineers. Then we also have Wayne Ebanks Sr., a locomotive engineer and Acre local chairman at Grand Central Terminal, who started as a custodian, then became a customer service representative, a conductor, and finally progressed to become a locomotive engineer. His son, Wayne Ebanks Jr., started at Metro North in 2011 at the age of 19 when he became the youngest conductor. Finally, Leslie Jones, who took the conductor's test on the day of her 12-year-old son Derek's middle school graduation, which she missed because of the test, got the job, and she's been with the railroad for 17 years as a conductor on all 3 lines. Her father worked at Transit for 30 years, also as a conductor, and her son Derek followed in her footsteps to become a conductor starting here in 2012. We proudly highlight the accomplishments of these families as they've shown progress in the early 20th century of railroading, when Black Americans served mostly as porters and laborers. This newest generation are hopscotching their parents by becoming conductors at young ages or moving over to management after working in operations. Finally, with respect to grade crossing grants, I am thrilled with the recent announcement by the U.S. Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration that MTA and Metro North will receive a $19.7 million federal grant to provide critical safety improvements to 9 grade crossings on Metro North's Harlem line. MTA and Metro North will now work in tandem with NYSDOT to implement the work to upgrade and replace existing at-grade crossing warning systems and to reconstruct, railroad crossing structures and approaches that are currently in place. This work follows a grant last year from the FRA that awarded $2.5 million to NYSDOT, MTA, and Metro North to upgrade railroad crossing at Hudson Avenue and Peekskill. We look forward to working closely with our federal, state, and local partners to efficiently deliver these safety improvements, which will complement the safety enhancements Metro North is already undertaking under our Way Ahead strategic plan. To conclude, we have no procurement and no action items this month. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Any questions for Kathy?
I have one.
Andrew.
Kathy, I don't know if this is for you or the folks that put together the transit book, but every month in the transit book, there is a ridership on other carriers table, and it shows the Long Island Railroad, New Jersey Transit, PATH, but it doesn't show Metro North. Do you know why that is?
I actually don't. I'll have to double check with Transit. I do not know why that is.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Kathy? All right, thank
I
you.
got
Please.
I got a question. I got a question too, Pat.
Yes, sir.
First of all, your report, you didn't really gloss over too much, but there's a lot of positive numbers in your report regarding ridership, and hopefully the ridership returns to a level where right sizing can mean returning to normal levels of service on Metro North. But there's also very good numbers regarding MDBF, and I'm just wonder if you could articulate for me, do you feel this is a function of reliability centered maintenance kicking in and full efficiency, or is it more a thing as you just have more space to move the equipment around now or something? But the numbers are really, really good, and protecting these assets that the state and citizens fund through proper maintenance is critical to how we advance and keep these numbers up. I'm curious about how you feel reliability centered maintenance is this is a big gold star for that process, or are you going to look to save money on maintenance?
Well, thank you for the question, Norman. I guess what I would say is, yeah, I mean, our MDBF last year was historic levels, and I really want to credit the leadership of our VP of Maintenance Equipment, Dave Kubicek, as well as our Chief Mechanical Officer, Jim Heimbecker, who've really, dug into the various issues affecting, the reliability of our equipment, and even in this COVID-constrained environment, have really made great strides in terms of improving the overall, maintenance and reliability of the equipment, and enhancing the RCM program. I feel like too frequently the mechanical department doesn't get the attention that it deserves with respect to the really good work that they do every day. So I'm really happy to have the opportunity to call out their leadership and the good work of, really everybody in that department in terms of, doing what they do to keep the fleet, operating under, very, very trying conditions.
Good. Anyone else for Kathy? Thank you, Kathy. I'm going to call on Phil Ing with respect to the Long Island Railroad.
Thank you, Pat. Good afternoon, everyone. At the end of 2020, the MTA proudly implemented positive train control in accordance with the FRA mandate. And with Debbie Chin, the Executive Director of PTC, leading the way, I had full confidence that we would complete the project on time and make it to the finish line. Most did not know that Debbie stayed on to ensure that we fulfilled our commitment and completed PTC. So it is with mixed emotions, but with great happiness for Debbie, as she is now retiring at the end of this month, after a storied 32-year career with the MTA. Debbie first joined New York City Transit in 1988 as an assistant electrical engineer and rose through the ranks to become chief system engineer and program officer. In 2015, Debbie joined the railroad to lead our PTC project, where she immediately took charge. And as we begin the Chinese Lunar New Year, the year of the ox, it represents hard work and movement. Appropriately, because of Debbie, we are reaping the rewards of her hard work year in and year out. Her dedication and commitment to public service is clear, and for that I am forever grateful, as Long Island Railroad and the public is forever safer because of her efforts. Thank you, Debbie, for all you've done for Long Island Railroad riders. I'd like to ask everyone just join me in congratulating her on a successful career in public service and wishing her the best in her next chapter. Thank you, everyone. Everything we do is truly about safety. And last week, our workforce across all the MTA agencies, including the railroad, were out braving the elements, as they are today as well. With zero visibility at times due to the heavy bands of snow and wind, the men and women took care of business, helping us to quickly and safely dig out of the worst snowstorm we've seen in recent years. And I'm proud of the workforce and their efforts as they continually ensure that we are operating safely every day. And keeping the public informed during the storm is another critical component. Information that gives our riders the power to make decisions regarding their travels, and continuously improving customer communication with timely information will always be a priority, which is why last month, under the lead of Chief Innovation Officer Will Fisher, we launched our new chat feature as part of Long Island Railroad Train Time. This new improved app gives our riders the comprehensive information they need so they can make informed decisions during storms like these. And riders were able to chat live with Long Island Railroad customer agents during the storm event. And they can do that every day from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. right within the app, getting answers to service-related questions and other railroad-related matters. Since the launch on January 18th, the feedback from both our customers and our own staff has been overwhelmingly positive. In this short period, we responded to more than 1,100 chats. Our busiest day so far was the day of the snowstorm, February 1st, where our reps handled nearly 450 chats. This new tool is allowing us to help customers more quickly, giving them information they need, and helping them to make their travel decisions easier. All of this speaks to our mission in keeping safety and customer service at the forefront of everything we do for all that we serve. With that, I'd like to report that our Long Island Railroad Care Service is still going strong despite the pandemic. In 2020, our customer service ambassadors helped over 1,500 customers, and overall, since we launched the program in July of 2018, we've helped over 6,000 customers. In comparison, in the 2 years before the launch of LIRR Care, we had only 36 requests through that program. So I'm proud of the staff who helped get this program off the ground and who continue to make sure it serves the needs of our ridership. It is a team effort from customer service agents fielding calls to station ambassadors, to platform ushers, and to the train crews. They are all the reason this service is successful and being used so often. And with that, I'd like to welcome MTA's first all-agency Chief Accessibility Officer, Quamel Arroyo, to the team. We're looking forward to working closely with him and further building on our efforts to date, collaboratively tackling the needs and fulfilling our vision to make the Long Island Railroad fully accessible. And at the turn of this year, Governor Cuomo opened the new Moynihan Train Hall in Manhattan, which serves a new home to Long Island Railroad customers alongside Amtrak. Moynihan is something that New York State will be proud of for generations to come. It is a sign of the future for the MTA and the Long Island Railroad as we continue building for the future. So congratulations to Empire State Development Group for this major accomplishment. But I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank Neville Perkins, John Hyland, Janie Chen, and the whole Long Island Railroad team who was so integral in this project to help bring it to life. Their contributions will be forever felt by the millions of people who will use this phenomenal terminal for generations to come. Like Metro North, in January, Long Island Railroad trains operated on time at 97.2%, exceeding our monthly goals of 94%. This also represents a 3.9% increase over the same month in 2020. And Long Island Railroad has been committed to continually tackling vital infrastructure needs throughout the last few years, and all this great work done by our workforce is evident by the improving and record on-time performance for the railroad. Our 2020 performance summary can be found in the book. We remain committed to stated good repair work, replacing components, and ensuring a more reliable trip on Long Island Railroad. And while ridership remains at 23 or 24% of our pre-pandemic weekday levels, with that, our March 8th service schedules will be in place shortly, supporting both service needs and critical work as we rebuild a new Long Island Railroad. The new schedule maintains a 24/7 service to all 11 branches, knowing that our ridership is spread throughout the day. And as riders adjust, we will continue to monitor ridership patterns and make more adjustments where possible to ensure that we can both right-size service and accommodate customer needs. We encourage all customers to check our website and Train Time for new timetables and schedules, which will be posted shortly. And congratulations to Metro North employee Dan Delgado for being selected as a Railway Age honoree. I'm proud to also announce that one of our standout employees was also recognized in that magazine. Munib Abbas was selected as an honorable mention as part of the Fast Trackers 20 Under 40 Awards for this year. Munib has been with us at the railroad for 4 years as a project coordinator, overseeing scope, schedule, and budget for the annual track stated good repair program. This includes leading the planning of track outages across operational departments and agencies from the beginning to end, including piggyback opportunities, delivering results while we continue looking for savings and cost efficiencies. Thank you and congratulations to Dan and Munib. And in conclusion, thank you to our customers who continue to ride with us and for our workforce for doing all they do day in and day out to ensure our system operates as safely and as efficiently as possible. I'd like to give special thanks to over 120 students from across our service territory who submitted entries in our 2020 to 2021 Safety School Slogan Contest. This year's winner was second grader Evan Munjal at Mount Pleasant Elementary School in Smithtown for his slogan, "Stay alive, stand behind the yellow line." And our middle school winner, Mia Schutt, a sixth grader at Sayville Middle School, won for her slogan, "Watch the tracks, not your apps." We appreciate the efforts of our school districts and the students to promote awareness and emphasize the importance of safety in their communities. Let's all care for one another, practice safety, continue to wear appropriate face coverings in public and on trains, and getting vaccinated when eligible. Thank you all. Stay safe. Long Island Railroad has one competitive procurement for this month. We're requesting MTA board approval to award to Corey's Incorporated this $3,186,584 negotiated contract to design, manufacture, test, and deliver 3 train simulator systems for all of our fleet, supporting increased training requirements for train crews operating within Eastside Access territory to Grand Central Terminal, including positive train control and familiarization of new equipment. The simulators will also support potential remedial training, emergency situations, equipment failures, physical characteristics, and numerous other operating scenarios. Chairman Foy, that concludes my remarks.
Well, any questions for Phil? All right, I'm going to make a motion on the procurement. Do I have a second?
Yeah, second, Pat.
Thank you, Kevin. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The procurement carries. Sarah.
Thanks, Pat. I'll be brief since we're launching into hour 4 here. Just a couple things to note on the snowstorm and the weather. I just want to thank our workforce and our team for their hard work over the last month, which has been snowstorm after ice storm after ice storm after snowstorm. So, you know, much more than I remember in recent years, and feels like it's been a little relentless. Each of these storms requires days of planning and constant vigilance above and beyond everything everyone else is doing already, plus likely long hours and sometimes even sheltering in place. So I appreciate the great work of our team, and of course appreciate the patience of our customers as we've been cleaning up from these storms. I know everyone's ready for the winter weather to be over, hopefully. I'm not even going to say it actually, because that will jinx us. On crime and, you know, the issues that we heard from Chief O'Reilly on, you know, I want to thank the NYPD for their partnership. Commissioner Shea is incredibly responsive and ready to have conversations with us at any time. Chief O'Reilly has been very cooperative and responsive. You know, I won't go into this for too long because there's been significant discussion over the last week or so on this. But, you know, I also want to thank the MTA police who, you know, are a constant presence in the subway system, along with our Eagle teams and our security forces who do a great job. You know, I think two points overall have to sort of guide us as we are thinking about this issue. And one is that, you know, it's really important for for us to provide a safe and secure environment for our customers and for people to be safe and secure in the system. But beyond that, they also have to feel safe and secure in the system, because confidence is incredibly important here. We know that confidence about re-entering your commute, re-entering the system is really important when it comes to COVID. And we know confidence about engaging with your commute as you're coming back to the city related to crime and safety and security is really important. So the numbers are what they are. I've said, you know, for 2 years that you can sort of make the weekly and the monthly crime numbers say whatever you want. Even one incident is too much in our system, because if we are going to reach our goal of what we want our system to be, which is the shining star of transit for all of North America, then it has to be a safe and secure system, and it has to feel really safe and secure. So I think we're getting there, but we've certainly got a ways to go. And the last couple of weeks have been troubling, to say the least, but I appreciate the partnership of everyone who's being responsive. And, you know, as we talk about the crime and incidents that are happening in the system, we're constantly also talking about the mental health crisis in the city. And I don't think that should be overlooked We have been asking for additional resources from the city for some time. I think for over 3 years now, Transit has been trying to work with the city in order to get the city to step up and allow the 311 system to work in the subway system. We believe it's an easy technical fix. It's finally, over the last couple of weeks, gotten some high level attention at City Hall, which we are very grateful for. If that 311 system is able to work in the subway system, if 311 operators can understand and acknowledge and address in the subway system, and if the city will allow mental health professionals and those folks into the system, that will go a long way towards, I think, impacting some of the issues that we're seeing here. I often say you can't just, because a great deal of the subway system is underground, you can't just forget it. You can't just be, out of sight, out of mind. And if we can, allow some of those city services into the system, that would be hugely helpful. On overnight service, I think everyone saw the announcement that this coming Sunday night, so Monday morning, we will go from being closed from 1 to 5 to being closed from 2 to 4, gives people an extra hour to ride the system at night, and then we're opening an hour earlier. We've continued to clean 24/7. We were never just cleaning from 1 to 5. We're always cleaning 24/7. So we will likely be less efficient, from 1 to 2 and 4 to 5, but we still have confidence that we will be able to do everything that we need to do to keep the system clean and disinfected. There's been some talk over the last couple of weeks about hygiene theater, which I sort of put into quotes. I think it's an important conversation to have. I would just remind this board and the public, we have an all of the above approach to cleaning, disinfecting, and safety in our system from COVID. So from the beginning, we, even when there wasn't a whole lot known about this virus to now, while we know a whole lot more and into the future when we know even more, we have been cleaning, we have been disinfecting, we have been wiping down surfaces, we have been making sure that our air filtration system is strong so that we can address aerosols. We have been, experimenting with other technologies like UV lighting, and we've been making sure that we are constantly talking about the importance of being vigilant about masks, because we know that that's the most important thing. To this day, the EPA, the CDC, the FDA, and other medical and health experts continue to tell us to clean. And so as long as those folks are telling us that disinfecting and cleaning and wiping down surfaces is important, we're going to continue to do that. It's obviously much more efficient for us to do that when we don't have people in the system. We tell our cleaners we don't want them, entering subway cars and attempting to clean around people, particularly if they're sleeping, or otherwise, not necessarily engaged with what's going on around them. We may be cleaning the other end of the car, but generally if folks are in cars, it makes it a lot tougher to clean and obviously harder to be efficient. I often say this for those of you who I'm sure have cleaned your own homes. It's a lot easier to clean your house when there's no one in your kitchen than when there are 100 people standing in your kitchen. Subway system is no different. When people are not in it, things are much more efficient. But that said, we are obviously very much looking forward to being closed for fewer hours overnight. It's a real signal that the economy is opening up again, that the city is opening up again. And it's exciting for us to be able to serve folks for longer overnight. And then finally, just a couple of notes on the memorial from February. I just want to thank those of you who were able to stop by in the system and see the memorial for yourselves. I know that many of you were able to do so, and it was a real gratifying thing for us to work on at Transit and at MTA, emotional obviously for us, but we're grateful to have been able to put it forward to the public and be able to offer New Yorkers a moment to stop and pause and say thank you and show their gratitude to the workers who kept the city moving during the pandemic. That's it for my remarks. I'll move on to the procurements and then I can take questions. The New York City Transit procurement package includes one item for an estimated amount of $7 million. The item is a 5-year pricing agreement contract with Alstom Transportation to purchase sole source replacement parts, including propulsion controllers, traction motors, and car body parts. These replacement parts will be used by the Division of Car Equipment for scheduled maintenance and normal maintenance for 2,427 subway cars, for which Alstom is the propulsion supplier. Alstom is the car builder for 1,002 of these subway cars. During the term of this agreement, it's projected that a total of 2,086 subway cars will undergo scheduled maintenance. I submit this item for board approval.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions for Sarah?
Just one quick one, Sarah. Do we have an agreement like this with Kawasaki as well?
I have to get back to you on that. I believe we do.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, good. I'm going to make a motion on the procurement. Do I have a second?
Second, Pat.
Thank you, Hadel. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. Jano Lieber has a C&D procurement from the Transit Committee. Jano.
Yes, C&D has one procurement action being brought to the through the Transit and Bus Committee this month. The item requests board ratification of a mod to the 8th Avenue Line CBTC contract with LK Comstock for the removal and disposal of out-of-service equipment and associated hardware accessories on the Flushing line, a different line. And the mod is in the amount of $12.5 million. The contract for the Flushing line CBTC signal system that was awarded back in 2010 did not include removal of decommissioned signal equipment due to funding constraints at that time, before many of us were here. It was contemplated that the removal work would be contractually bundled with other work planned for the Flushing line, but that other Flushing line work has been delayed somewhat due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So what we're proposing to do here is to accelerate this removal of work, which, by the way, costs money to maintain, and which, if it, in some circumstances, falls off the elevated if you don't spend a lot of money to maintain it. But removing this work through this modification will expedite the completion by permitting the work to start in early 2021 to take advantage of already scheduled outages, resulting in reduced support costs, and to further mitigate the risk, as I said, of out-of-service equipment coming loose and falling from the elevated structure. Comstock is an experienced contractor. We're working with them on other CBTC jobs, QBL, Queens Boulevard West, and also 8th Avenue. And they're familiar with the out-of-service equipment because they were the installation subcontractor on that Flushing Line CBTC project. So I submit the procurement action to the board for ratification.
Thank you, Jano. Any questions for Jano on this procurement? I'll move it. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. Danny, would you?
I have one question for Sarah. If we're done with her,
please ask, Commissioner.
Hi, I'm sorry, Sarah. I didn't mean to put it that way.
No.
In the book, in the recent transit book, it looks like the MDBF on the Staten Island Railway is way down. Is that the R44s finally showing their age, or did some event take place?
I will get back to you, Andrew.
Thank you.
All right, good. Over to Danny DiCrescenzo on Bridges and Tunnels.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. MTA Bridges and Tunnels continues to make progress with our COVID-19 mitigation measures. A key part of this progress is vaccinating our workforce. As of the end of last week, approximately 32% of our total workforce have received at least one dose of the vaccine. I'd like to thank B&T employees as well as medical workers who have helped us take another step forward in our efforts to combat COVID-19 with this vaccination program. In this month's committee materials, B&T reports on our customer focus areas via the 2020 Customer Environment Report. The full report can be found in this month's B&T committee document. I'll just touch on a few of the highlights of 2020. Bridges and Tunnels striped over 88,000 linear feet of roadway, repaired over 954 potholes, and swept over 13,000 miles of roadway at our facilities this past year. Bridges and Tunnels customer safety performance also improved. The total collision rate improved by 35% in 2020, and the collisions with injury rate was 19% better than in 2019. B&T continued to make progress with its LED lighting program, with 91% of its roadway lighting now provided by high-efficiency, low-maintenance LED fixtures. And as Jano discussed earlier in the C&D presentation, several B&T roadway and other construction projects were accelerated in 2020, taking advantage of the reduced traffic. With better safety performance and timely incident response by B&T personnel, and aided by these lower traffic levels, Bridges and Tunnels was able to provide customer travel times that were at or near all-time lows in 2020, despite this increase in construction activity. This helped keep our customers, including essential workers, moving safely and efficiently throughout the pandemic with minimal traffic congestion delays. Finally, I wish to thank all Bridge and Tunnel personnel for their outstanding winter storm performance. As you are out there again today, your efforts in cleaning snow, maintaining critical supplies and equipment, and keeping our Bridge and Tunnel facilities open and safe for all customers and employees throughout these multiple snowstorms and extreme winter weather conditions is greatly appreciated. Nice job to everyone. And finally, Mr. Chairman, there are no B&T procurements for this month. This concludes my remarks.
Danny, thanks for the concise report. Any questions for Danny? All right, terrific. Let's move to the Finance Committee. Marcia Tanian and David Keller will introduce the finance action items. Marcia.
Hi, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. The Finance Committee staff summary and supplemental resolutions begin on page 22 of the Finance Committee book. And we are seeking board authority to issue up to $506 million of the TBTA second subordinate notes or bonds, and that's the TBTA third lien, basically, to provide funds for the Central Business District tolling program, infrastructure, tolling systems, and the implementation expenses. This is to get us poised to be up and running once we get the federal nod. We don't have a specific time yet for the transaction, and we will be keeping the board posted as soon as we do. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from Marcia? Good. Before I move this, this is an important item that Jano mentioned before. It's an important component of the funding for the 2020 to 24 capital plan, and it's terrific that we're going to be moving forward on this. I'll make the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? All right, good. Thank you. David.
Thank you. I have two staff summaries to present. First, the MTA Treasury Department has submitted a staff summary seeking approval to authorize the annual MRT2 escalator payments to Dutchess, Orange, and Rockland counties pursuant to Section 1270A of the Public Authorities Law of the State of New York. The formula-derived payments are $2,263,755.16 to Dutchess County, $2,689,068.65 to Orange County, and $3,381,522.72 to Rockland County. Funds for the purpose of these payments are available on deposit in the MRT2 corporate transportation account, and Josie Ancodio, the treasurer, is available if there are any questions.
David, thank you. Any questions for David or Josiane? I'll make a motion to approve. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? The action carries. David?
Thank you. B&T Finance Department has submitted a staff summary seeking approval of resolutions which will A, certify and transfer $472,754,532 in operating surplus to the MTA and New York City Transit pursuant to Section 1219A2B of the Public Authorities Law of the State of New York. Transfer $763,475 representing 2020 investment income to the MTA pursuant to Section 569C of the Public Authorities Law of the State of New York. Advance the 2021 B&T surplus per attached resolution. And I want to just point out that the calculation in Deloitte & Touche's letter attached to the staff summary represents Tri-Borough Bridge and Tunnel Authority's operating surplus for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020. And Lloyd J. Rahm is available if there are any questions.
David, thank you. Any questions for David or Lloyd on this matter? I'll make a motion to approve. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. David Florio is going to introduce the real estate items. David.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real estate has two action items for consideration and approval. The first is for Metro North Railroad, is for the acquisition of easements from the town of Greenberg for improvements to the Hartsdale Station. The second item is an MTA agency-wide policy to permit MTA real estate to award telecommunications and utility franchise licenses. There are, in addition, Mr. Chairman, 2 information items, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding any of the foregoing.
Thank you, David. Any questions for David? I'll make a motion to approve the real estate items. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? Thank you. The real estate items carried. David, thank you. And now I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second? Thank you, Kevin Law. All in favor? Aye. The meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody, for your time and attention. Good. Let me start with a weather update. First, continues to be the case that customers who have the option or the ability to stay at home should do that. Most of our customers are heeding that advice. Traffic is lower than normal on the bridges and tunnels, light to moderate ridership across the rest of the system. Buses are being run on a 75% schedule, reduced schedule as before. Articulated buses are back in the garage. All 40-foot buses have been chained. Good collaboration and cooperation with the Department of Sanitation, which is doing a good job keeping the roads passable. We're providing all scheduled trips on paratransit. From a subway point of view, light ridership, which is good. Customers ought to be careful throughout the entire system, but especially on elevated platforms and stairs leading to and from elevated platforms. It is likely the decision hasn't been made, and we'll message it, obviously, that after the evening rush, we'll reduce express service, and we'll report on that. And lastly, on bridges and tunnels, traffic lighter than normal, facilities operating with a 35-mile-an-hour speed restriction. So at this point, no major incidents. Thankfully, some scattered delays, and with that, happy to take your questions.
And first up today is David Meyer of the New York Post. David.
Good afternoon, Pat. I have a question for you, and I have a question for Jano, if that's all right. I'll start with the question for you. Listening back to Kathy O'Reilly's presentation today, this has come up a bunch of times, but I just wanted to ask you directly. The MTA is calling for a greater police presence in the subways. However, the amount of crime in the subways, at least in the last few months, is about 56%, 50% less than it was the previous year. So I'm wondering how you justify that, your request, given the fact that the stats show that crime is down, and Chief O'Reilly said that herself.
Well, so 2 or 3 points, David. The stats don't show that uniformly, right? The system is safe. Murders are infrequent, but last year, sadly, the number of murders doubled in 2020. Felony assaults in January were up 26%. Chief O'Reilly reported to me what was alarming news, and I condemned these attacks when she was finished speaking, that there was a 200% increase in assaults on police officers in the system. That's awful, ought to be condemned by everybody. Point one. Point two, ridership, as you pointed, is significantly lower than it was, and on a basis adjusted for the decline in ridership, I'd argue crime is even higher. And then thirdly, we asked for the 1,000 after talking with MTA police doing research, and went back. In 1995, when the transit police merged with the NYPD, there were over 4,000, I think 4,300 approximately, police officers in the subway system. It's the same subway system. Actually, it's a little more extensive, right? The Second Avenue subway didn't exist then. Other pieces have been put in place, but I think the call for 1,000 additional police officers over the 500 that the mayor and the police commissioner spoke about, the number turned out to be 644, as Chief O'Reilly reported, and a significant increase in police resources and mental health resources in the system, we believe is critical. And then Jano is right here.
Great. My question for Jano, if you can hear me, is you mentioned that the FHA had said that the MTA is going to get fast-tracked on the environmental review for congestion pricing. Can you tell us exactly what the FAA has told you In terms of, I know you said you couldn't provide a timeline, but approximately, what does that mean? When are the next steps on congestion pricing going to happen? And
David, in all fairness, I don't have a specific answer for you. What they conveyed was that they understood that this had been sat on by the prior administration. It had not been dealt with timely or appropriately, and that they were going to give us, one, a timely response on the mechanics of which version of the environmental review they wanted completed, and two, that what they would work with us to make sure to facilitate our completion of the submission of the data and their review and action on the data. So that, but the message was that they got the message, which Pat and other leaders have been pushing for some time, that it was cynical, that the Trump administration sat on it and didn't let us advance central business district tolling, which is environmentally per se a plus on environmental grounds, and that they were going to move it very quickly. So we are now, as Bob Ferrand said, in this board meeting, we actually got approved the money to go out and build the infrastructure. So we are taking every step that makes us ready to move quickly when the feds, who are now real partners in this, do take their action.
Can I just go back to David Meyer's question on policing?
Of course.
Can you all hear me? Oh, okay, I didn't know if you could hear me. David, I just also wanted to point out one other point, which is that our worker assaults continue to be elevated. So I think the other day just looked back at like the last 12 or 14 weeks of worker harassment and assaults, and we're well over an average of 40 or 42, 43 per week. So I would just point you to that as well. The importance of making sure that we're preventing those.
A good point. Thank you, Sarah.
And we move on to Alfonso Castillo with Newsday. Alfonso, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Pat, I got kind of a big picture question about the pandemic. It's now been a year, I think, since we've done one of these in person. We're about a year into the pandemic. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about how much you think the transportation system is changed forever, even after the pandemic. What changes has the MTA gone through over the last year that you think are here to stay, both for the better or for the worse, whether it means some amount of riders gone for good, some lessons that the MTA has learned operationally that you think will stick around, that kind of thing?
Well, look, thinking at a high level, I start with this, right? There are 450,000 Americans, don't hold me to the number, but it's a number, it's probably higher than that. There are 450,000 of our countrymen and women who passed away from the coronavirus. New York was the epicenter for a long time. There were grievous losses suffered at the MTA. 146 of our colleagues have passed away, and I think that impact is going to resonate in the country, in the state, in the city, and at the MTA for a long period of time. And I think that those of us who had grandparents or elderly relatives who spoke about the years after the Depression, it made a huge impression on them. I'm not suggesting that this is a Depression-like recovery, but I think that children and teenagers and adults and everybody will tell stories of their life during the pandemic, and I think that is going to last forever. I think that it will have an impact on transit agencies across the world, and in the short, intermediate, and long term. I think the disinfecting regimes are here to stay. I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't know about variants. I don't know about the next pandemic, but the experts talk about those risks and about what the country and the world ought to do to prepare for those. And we're going to, we had a plan prior to COVID. We had a second wave plan. Transit agencies like ours, and this is something we're already thinking about, will have long-term plans about the next pandemic, the next variant, et cetera. I think there will clearly be changes in ridership and ridership patterns. For instance, even now, the timing of the morning rush and the evening rush has changed. It starts earlier. Part of that is because the mix of employees, we've got a lot of essential employees, including construction workers. I think that in terms of recovering ridership, and obviously McKinsey and BCG and governmental bodies and the Partnership for New York City have done lots of work on that. Some percentage of the ridership will decide because they want to do it because their employer, like a Salesforce, is going to allow them to do it, and all sorts of variations on it. I think that's probably going to be most deeply felt at commuter rails all over the country. And I think there are going to be a number of financial and operating and social and transportation considerations that are being thought about and will be grappled for years and decades to come.
And the next question is from Michelle Caskey with Bloomberg News. Michelle.
Hi, thank you for the presser. So I have two questions. One is, again, any kind of update on when the board might be considering or discussing again the anticipated increase in subway and bus fares? And then my other question might be a Bob Ferran question, which is basically when Jana was talking about that $10 billion of MTA borrowing in the capital program, that's now it's uncertain the exact size of that. And he said that, you know, Bob has a better idea of really how much would be of borrowing would be available. If you could give some detail on that, would be great.
So let me deal with the first one in just a few words. The answer is in several months, and we'll come back to you on that, and then Bob will answer the second.
The $10 billion that we were going to borrow, which is at the back end of the capital program, that was always been the plan, was to be funded out of our operating budget. It either could be done with fare box bonds, or it could be done with perhaps a dedicated tax fund bond. You know, we do have the PMT bonds now. We're using them for deficit financing. We'd have to get approval from the Capital Program Review Board if we wanted to use it for the capital program. But what Jana was really meaning is we have to have revenues that can support our operations, and then have revenues that can be used for debt service. And so it just depends on how quickly we return to normal in terms of our dedicated taxes, how soon we get back up to a level of operating revenues that will enable us to, again, to pay operating expenses and also the debt service. So that's the point. Thank you.
And we move on to Ben Kabak with Second Avenue Sagas. Ben.
Thanks, Tim. I have two questions. They're not really related, so if I may. The first concerns the ridership projections. I know the current ridership projections show 80 to 95% or so by 2024, but do we have more detailed ridership projections for the next 12 months? And how is this tracking the initial McKinsey assessment from early on in the pandemic?
Bob, you want to speak to it? Ben, hang on 1 second.
Sure, thanks, Pat.
I don't have the specific numbers right here, but we have been doing pretty well tracking with the McKinsey assessment. You did see in the report today that we had favorable operating revenues, about 184 between both the subway, buses, and commuter rails. So we are seeing an improvement perhaps over the worst case scenario, but we'll just have to see how those trends work. But again, we did know that we should be performing better because we hope we're not going to be staying at the worst case level, okay? But that was done for our protection, because we could not afford more downside risk. So.
Thanks. And then my second question is for Jano regarding the Second Avenue subway. I know he mentioned during the meeting today that they're anticipating fast approvals from DOT after the Trump admin sat on it for 18 months as well. Do you have an updated timeline for when construction could start and what the projected revenue service date would be for the second phase of the Second Avenue subway at this point?
No, it wouldn't be fair just to throw a dart at the wall, Ben. But I can tell you this, that when we do get the grant, and it will not be, the grant's not going to happen in 3 months, because there was some process still remaining, even if it was being dealt with promptly by the folks in Washington. But we do have construction packages, including utility relocations, ready to go when we know the money is coming and we're able to kickstart that project. So construction, yes, pretty soon after we get an affirmative result on the grant.
Thanks.
And moving on to Christina Goldbaum of the New York Times. Christina.
Hey, thanks for this presser. My question is about federal aid. Senator Schumer is telling me that the MTA should expect $6 billion in this next stimulus package. I'm curious how that affects your guys' financial outlook.
So, Christina, I think with Senator, let me start with this. Senator Schumer and the entire New York congressional delegation have been MTA and transit heroes on a national basis. And the fact that he's now the majority leader, the importance of that to New York and the country and the MTA can't be understated. What I understand Senator Schumer to have said is that the MTA would receive at least $6 billion. We have been, and I think that's consistent with your tweet as I understand it. I don't tweet, but people occasionally give them to me. And that's terrific news. We've been working very closely with Senator Schumer in his office, the congressional delegation, staff, and Speaker Pelosi's office, and that is extraordinary. And when you look, clearly the MTA over the last year has received the largest amount of emergency funding given to any transportation agency, certainly in the nation, perhaps in the world, arising out of an emergency. And that is in large part due to the unbelievable work of the majority leader, the now majority leader in the New York congressional delegation.
Okay, well, I mean, what I'm hearing is at least 6, possibly up to 7. So again, if you're still facing at least like a $1 billion deficit, what does that mean in terms of the steps that you have to take? And when will those decisions be made?
Look, our ask is $8 billion, at least 6, and getting to 7 and perhaps higher is, would be an incredible achievement. We've got an $8 billion deficit that we've got to offset. And Senator Schumer's work and the work from the New York congressional delegation have been extraordinarily important, period. Can't put enough exclamation points on that.
And next up is Clayton Gusa of the New York Daily News. Clayton.
Hi, Pat. I have 2 questions. The first one is, can you tell me or give us an update, given the crime spike and frightening events in recent weeks, what percentage of the city's subway stations have CCTV cameras? And along those lines, I know that system-wide CCTV rollout was a integral part of the capital plan. I didn't see any announcements on that in Jano's update. So can you give me an update on what percentage of the system's covered and any plans moving forward on expanding that coverage?
So Clayton, on the latest number percentage, I will ask Tim Minton to come back to you. Some additional stations have been covered. And CCTV for subway stations and commuter rail stations, most of which are covered, is a first order priority.
Okay. And then I know you said that you announced today that draconian service cuts would be avoided thanks to the federal funding. But can you give riders any updates on any future plans to what you call right-size service to ridership? Is that still on the table? And and I just wanted to clear up one thing on the wage freeze. Would that renege the bargained wage increases included in collective bargaining agreements, including Local 100?
Well, look, I don't discuss labor issues in public meetings or in press gaggles. It's been my longstanding policy, and I'll continue it. I'm going to ask Sarah Feinberg, who I think may have data information on cameras.
Yeah, Pat, thanks. And Clayton, we'll follow up with you with specifics because I don't have the numbers in front of me. But, when the capital program was frozen, we at Transit were already working on our own camera project, and we continued to install and, in fact, to escalate our own camera project. So just because you don't see it in the capital program doesn't mean it's not happening. So we've been installing a large number of cameras, particularly on platforms and on trains and near conductor positions throughout the system. And we can come back to you with specifics, but that it is continued. I didn't want you to think it hadn't been happening.
Yeah, the number is just over 50%, Clayton, just over 50%. And we move on to Danielle Moyo, Politico, represented here this afternoon. Danielle. Danielle, if you just hit that unmute key, we'll be able to hear you. There you go.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me? Sorry. Rookie error. Okay. No, my question's about congestion pricing. I was just wondering what other remaining issues need to be worked out at the local level to implement it? Is there anything that needs to be done ahead of federal approval?
Well, there'll be public hearings. The state law that authorized congestion pricing did not create a need to have a separate state environmental process. The environmental process that will determine this is the one that US DOT, FHWA specifically will determine is the one. And as you know, that's advice and direction that we've been waiting for well over a year and a half, actually longer than that.
Okay, and then I think you mentioned before about moving forward with, implementing some of the cameras. Can you just elaborate on that process and how you see that, when you see that finishing?
Yeah, Danielle, I think you were referring to is the issuance of the authorization of the issuance of the bond issue to fund the infrastructure for congestion for central business district tolling. We're not in a position to make those installations until we get a sign-off from US DOT, either it's an EIS or an EA. And what we're doing today is getting ready to be able to, borrow the money. We have taken the project really largely as far as it can go without the US DOT making a decision on this specific environmental process.
Thank you.
All right, we move on. Just one correction. Clayton, the answer is just over 60%, 60. I misread it. Now we go to a man who does not get his data wrong, Paul Berger of the Wall Street Journal. Paul.
Hi, Pat.
Hello, Paul.
I have a couple of questions. I think the first one's probably for Bob. Last month, I asked Bob how much the budget was, and he said it was just shy of $17.1 billion. But this month in his presentation, it looked like the budget was $17.5 billion. So I was just wondering what changed in the last month to increase the budget.
The budget really was 17.25, so almost 17.3. The difference is the accrued expenses that we had in December are actually getting paid in this year. So probably January, February. So the difference between those two numbers, about $250 million, is the difference in the accruals and cash. So since we didn't pay it, recognize again, we operate on a cash basis. So what we thought was going to be an expense didn't hit the books. We didn't hit it in December. It's going to happen in the first part of this year. So that $250 million just moved over into the budget. So for 2021.
Yeah, thanks. I realize it's kind of really in the weeds. It's just I always thought that whatever was approved by the board, that was like fixed, but it sounds like it can shift throughout the year.
Well, the expenditures were the approved expenditures. It's just when they got paid, okay? So we're not changing the expenditures by the 250. We're just changing the time they get paid. So they didn't get paid in December. They're going to get paid in 2021.
Okay. And then thanks, Bob. And then I think the other question is for you, Pat. I just want to clarify the $8 billion shortfall that you say could necessitate wage freezes and service cuts in over the next 3 years, or particularly 23, 24. Would they be taken off the table if you were to get $8 billion in federal aid?
Look, getting $8 billion in additional federal aid would be an extraordinary thing and would fill our deficits through 2024. I think the outlook the MTA is still going to have huge challenges. We had a structural deficit before the pandemic. We're going to continue to have a structural deficit. Depending on the decline in ridership, there will be a continuing drag on fare revenue, depending on what percentage of our customers work from home, work remotely, work an additional half a day, and that's going to have a lingering, at least short and intermediate term impact on fare revenues. But getting, Paul, that level of financing would be extraordinary and would offset the deficit through 2024.
And we move on to Dave Colon of Streets Blog. Pat, I know you look forward to the sports with Dave. He's activated the mood lighting filter there, but I do believe he's rocking the Knicks today. Dave, go ahead.
That's right. I have different lighting today. I'm on vacation, lovely Sunnyside, Queens. Pat, I had a question about the state budget first and another one. Last April, you told me it was not okay if MTA dedicated funds or fund anyway, but in this coming state budget, not only is there money in the MTA fund, that's the general fund, but money from the internet sales tax.
So Dave, two things. One, I'm going to make a personal observation. Most people are rocking the Nets and supporting the Nets these days. You're breaking up severely.
Oh, am I really?
Yeah.
I
can hear you fine now.
Yeah, we lost the part after listening to this. Go ahead, Dave. Try again.
Okay, well, so you said last year that it wasn't okay that any MTA money that was dedicated was going to the state general fund. This year there is an MMTOA fund that looks like it's getting diverted, and an internet sales tax fund, which is specifically for the capital program. And this isn't a shortfall because there's less money, it's just taking existing money. So is that still not okay? And is the MTA lobbying to make sure that it gets that money?
So let me ask Bob Ferrand to start on the facts so that we're all on the same factual page.
Yeah, the $145 million that people are talking about is not just hitting the MTA. If you recall, the budget director said if they get a certain level of federal funds, that they would do a reduction to aid to localities, and I think the percentage was 5%. If they got more, if the $15 billion, the upper range that they're looking for, then perhaps the cuts could be much less or not at all. So what's happening is we're seeing a proposed reduction in aid to localities, which MTA is part of that, but it affects school districts and others. So we're not being treated any differently than others, and it's put on the table to address perhaps budget shortfalls depending on what the federal government provides in terms of support.
And look, the passage of President Biden's $1.9 trillion rescue and stimulus bill will surely include funding to state and localities all over the country, including New York State, and that ought to be terrific news for New York. And obviously, $30 billion in that bill for public transit, including the MTA.
And we go down the stretch with Paul Burton of Bond Buyer, and then we'll close it out with Jose Martinez. Paul, you're up.
Yeah, hi, Pat. Earlier you mentioned about how ridership trends are changing, and the MTA this week reduced its overnight closure from 1 to 5 a.m. to 2 to 4 a.m. What timetable might the MTA have for restoring full 24-hour service, and what variables are at play?
Yeah, look, Paul, we are happy that we're restoring those 2 hours of service on Monday morning, February 22nd for customers. We look forward to bringing New Yorkers 24-hour service for the city that never sleeps. We want to do that as soon as possible. We'll be looking to the governor and his, lifting the state of emergency or declaring the pandemic or coming to a point in which 24-hour service again, is advisable. Paul, I don't have a specific date. I wish I did.
And we will take it home with Jose Martinez of the city, who has rapidly unmuted. Go ahead, Jose.
Okay, very good. Hi, Pat.
two questions. Number one, how do you regain riders who have avoided the system throughout this entire pandemic? Number one. And then if I could get a response from you, speaking for the MTA, in response to Local 100 putting out a statement in reference to the wage freezes, in which they say if the MTA wants a war, they will get a war.
Yeah, look, on the second one, as I said before, I've had a policy in the relatively short time I've been in public service. I don't comment about labor discussions or labor negotiations, just don't do that. With respect to customers, look, there are many reasons customers were riding the system a year ago and aren't today, including their employer's office is closed. They've been authorized or required or encouraged to work remotely. The pandemic has obviously closed lots of businesses in New York, across the country, including restaurants. And Broadway's been closed for, way too long a period of time because of the pandemic. We all get that, but it's a terrible loss in terms of quality of life in New York. There are going to be 100 reasons why people are not commuting, including some have made decisions to work an extra half a day or a day or more at home. Here's what we can do. We can make sure that the system is disinfected and clean and is complying with the requirements of the FTA, the CDC, and frankly, the EPA as well. And we're going to continue to do that. I think we've innovated and taken our disinfecting to a new level. I think that every transit agency is going to be disinfecting and cleaning differently when the pandemic's over compared to what we agencies were doing a year ago. And the other thing that we can do, and by the way, 76% of our customers say they've never seen the system cleaner. Personally, I think on masks, I think we're going to be all wearing masks longer than we expect. And mask compliance is, north of 96, 97%, and it's an extraordinary thing. That's action by our customers for their benefit, the benefit of fellow commuters and our employees. And the other thing, it's incumbent upon us, and Sarah Feinberg and the other agency presidents and I have been clear about this. We have an obligation to provide a safe and secure environment. The horrific attacks of last week on the A train violate that principle. We can't have that. The NYPD did extraordinary work in arresting the perpetrator and apparently getting a confession. And that is why we've been really advocating hard, and will continue to do that, for additional police officers in the transit system, and additionally, more mental health resources for those who need them, and that's clearly is clearly part of the problem and will be part of the solution, both the policing and mental health resources.
All right, thanks, Pat, Bob, Sarah, Jano, and good afternoon, everybody from MTA headquarters in Lower Manhattan.
Thank you all.